A 7-year-old Uzumaki Naruto was walking around the outskirts of Konoha. The blonde boy, who was wearing a white shirt with an orange spiral on it, along with a pair of dark blue shorts, as well as 3 strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks, had just pulled his greatest prank to date, releasing a bunch of harmless garter snakes into the girls' bathrooms at school. Of course, Iruka-sensei had caught him, and he was punished, but he didn't care. At least he was getting some acknowledgement, although he didn't like the idea of being known solely for his pranks. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto saw a dark-clad figure lying on the ground in the warm weather and light breeze that made the leaves of the trees rustle in a kind of exasperated way. His mouth twisted into a grin at the fun he could have with the sleeping figure. Naruto crept silently towards the slumbering figure, pen in hand, ready to draw all over the unsuspecting victim. However, when he reached the side of the soon-to-be victim of his prank, he noticed that the man was staring at him with a blank look in his eyes. Naruto froze when he saw this and started to mumble an apology to the man. Sorry, I'm sorry. No hard feelings, right? The boy asked the man, not making eye contact. When he heard no response, he looked at the man, expecting to see the cold fury that people always have on their faces after his jokes. Instead, the man was lying on the ground in exactly the same position he had been when Naruto first saw him. What is he, sleeping with his eyes open? Naruto thought, a sweat drop forming on the back of his head. Still searching for a prank to pull, Naruto settled for the kick someone in the ribs and run away gag. An oldie but a goodie. Naruto drew his leg back and delivered the hardest kick a 7-year-old could manage. He expected the man to get up and chase him, but instead he simply lay there. Once again walking over to the prone figure, Naruto looked at the man's face, only to notice that it was turning slightly blue. In a moment of clarity, Naruto realized that the figure wasn't sleeping. He was dead. Shocked at his newfound discovery, Naruto turned around to run away, only to find his path blocked by another figure, this one in an ANBU uniform. Naruto was frightened right then. He normally got blamed for things he didn't do, and this was something he didn't do. Hell, he didn't even know what happened, other than he found the guy dead. It isn't what it looks like, he exclaimed quickly. I just found him. I know exactly what it looks like, the ANBU said, walking over to the body. Naruto could see that the shinobi had dark black hair, much like the dead man had. Uchiha Shisui appears to have been suffocated or drowned. Killed by Uchiha Itachi. The masked ninja replied. That's awesome. How you can tell that just by looking at a dead body? Naruto exclaimed, glad that he wasn't being blamed for the death of the man. How do you do that? There was a pause for a moment, as the ANBU turned and looked at Naruto, his eyes turning from black to red, with 3 odd marks circling his pupils. Because I am Itachi, he stated calmly. Now that you have seen this, I cannot let you live, he said as he drew his sword. Naruto turned to run, but was stopped when the cold metal of an ANBU sword cut through his stomach. The sword was quickly removed before it was once again slid through his body. Naruto let out a scream, only to find it muffled by the hand of the ANBU. As Naruto slid to the ground, he was rolled over. Before he lost consciousness, he saw the ninja take out a kunai. Then everything went black. The next thing that Naruto knew, he was lying in a bed in a hospital. However, having never been hospitalized before, he didn't know where he was. He tried to open his eyes, but found that he was stopped by something covering them. Reaching up to touch his eyes, he felt the coarse but soft texture of gauze. Suddenly, he was racked with a fit of pain as the adrenaline of his awakening wore off. He groaned and winced in pain. It wasn't until someone spoke up that he realized someone was in the room. Naruto-kun, it is good to see you are awake, said Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage. Aji-san, what happened? Naruto managed to groan out while he winced. It would seem that you were attacked by Uchiha Itachi and thrown in the river, left for dead, Sandaime said. You were found floating in the river along with the body of Uchiha Shisui by an old student of mine, and she brought you both back. Hey, old man, what's with my eyes? Naruto interrupted the venerable Hokage. Although he couldn't see it, the Hokage cringed before he answered. I was about to explain that. It seems that for whatever reason, Itachi damaged your eyes beyond our healing abilities. This elicited a gasp of shock from Naruto. Does this mean I'm blind? He asked, through gasps of breath. He began to cry at the prospect of never being able to see again. Actually, far from it, the old man said. My former student is a very good medic Nin, and she was able to transplant Shisui's eyes into you. It is very rare indeed, but it was vital to your survival that every place that blood could leak out from was plugged. That included your eyes. You, I have some dead guy's eyes in my head. Naruto yelled. Yes, Naruto-kun, I suppose you do. The old man chuckled. Naruto, those eyes are very special. They hold the bloodline limit of the Uchiha clan. What's a bloodline limit? Asked Naruto. It's a special ability that is passed down through someone's family, explained the gray man. Now, since you are not an Uchiha, I do not think that the limit will awaken in your eyes, but that doesn't mean that they aren't valuable. If someone were to take them, Konoha would be in very big trouble. Naruto just lay in bed digesting all of the new information he had just learned. Old man, how long was I out for? Did anything important happen? He asked. To answer your first question, you were unconscious for about 2 weeks. Now, Naruto, the second thing is pretty bad. Itachi, the man that attacked you, he murdered his entire family except for his little brother, Sasuke. Sarutobi said in a sad voice. This means that there are only 4 people left in the world with the same kinds of eyes you have. Naruto just sat there in silence. He didn't know what to do. He was only 7 for crying out loud, and he just found out that he had some dead guy's eyes in his head, and the dead guy's family was dead, except for one kid. This day just couldn't get any weirder. Oh, how wrong he was. After checking up on Naruto, Sarutobi made his way back to his office. He had a meeting to conduct with someone, and it wasn't going to be good. As he entered his office, he saw his old student, Tsunade, waiting for him. She was holding a standard medical file, with all of the information they could gain from Naruto while he was unconscious. Everything seems to be fine, Sarutobi-sensei. The blonde woman said. There is one interesting thing. You said he was an orphan, right? The Sandame just nodded. Well, I ran a DNA test with some extra blood samples we had. And well, you should look at them yourself. She handed the old man the folder. When he opened it, he stared at a complete genetic profile of the blonde. However, what grabbed his attention was the report that Tsunade had written up. Who else has seen this? He demanded. Only Shizune and I have seen the report, she stated calmly. Sarutobi began to massage his temples as he felt a migraine coming on. Do you know how this could have happened? She asked. I have an idea, although I shudder to think of how she'll take this. Sarutobi said. He pressed a button on his intercom and waited for his secretary to respond. I need you to have Mitarashi Anko meet me as soon as possible, he ordered. The aforementioned Jounin was currently training out at Field 38. Mitarashi Anko was a kunoichi known for her short temper, more than slightly sadistic nature, lack of proper clothing, and her prowess with kunai knives. She was a little annoyed that the Hokage was pulling her away from her training, but she needed a short break anyways. The brown trench coat didn't move at all as she made her way up the winding stairs. When she entered his office, she was greeted by the sight of the old man, as well as Tsunade, the legendary medic Sannin. You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama? She asked, a look of slight confusion passing through her brown eyes. Yes, as you know, Uchiha Itachi attacked and killed his best friend, as well as a small boy a couple weeks ago. Tsunade ran a blood test to look for any possible relatives. Anko didn't like where this was going. There were only 2 reasons why he would call her in to discuss this kind of situation. Anko, the Sandame said, breaking her train of thought. We have good reason to believe that it's him. Anko's eyes grew wide at those words, and she collapsed into a chair, grasping her breath and shaking her purple-tinted hair in such a manner, as if to knock loose a certain memory. Tsunade thought this was strange, even for Anko, who was known for her loud entrances and more than slightly sadistic nature. What do you mean him? She questioned. What in the hell is going on? Sarutobi sighed at the question of his student. During the Kyuubi attack, there were many S-class secrets made, one of which was Anko's pregnancy. He stated, What do you mean, pregnant? She's only 24. That would make her 17. At the time, I know that's rather young. but that's not exactly worthy of such secrecy. Tsunade said, angry that she was left out of the loop. You know who Anko's Jounin sensei was, don't you? Sarutobi asked, rubbing his head. You know what he did? Of course Tsunade knew this. Anko's Jounin sensei was Orochimaru, her former teammate turned missing mean. He was wanted for experimenting on humans, but she didn't see what that had to do with. Oh my god, Tsunade gasped, looking at the slouched figure resting in a chair, her hands grabbing her stomach. Yes, due to one of Orochimaru's experiments. Anko hasn't aged in over 7 years. Sarutobi said, trying to comfort the sobbing women in his office. And due to another of his experiments, she found she was pregnant. We think it was part of an experiment to create a new bloodline limit. So, you're saying that my baby is alive? Anko asked, through ragged breaths. Why? Why did you lie to me then? She demanded. Anko, I had no intention of lying to you about this. When I found your son, there was no evidence that he was related to you in any way, and due to the damage of the QB, we just assumed that your son was dead. I'm very sorry about this. I want to see him right now, Anko demanded. There's no way that I'm leaving him now. Who knows what he's going through because of me? Of course, Anko, but before that, I have a few other things I want to discuss with you first. The Hokage instructed. All right, but can you at least tell me his name? She said. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. The third replied, watching her reaction. Anko's face was a mixture of emotions. Happy and sad were interchanged with anger and fury. She was grateful for the chance to be a part of her son's life, sad that he had been hospitalized in critical condition for the past 2 weeks, and angry at the villagers, who were too ignorant to see that the boy, her son, wasn't the demon that was sealed into him. Anko, in the DNA results, Tsunade found some very interesting information. It seems that Naruto has a large number of genetic markers in common with the Yondaime. This elicited a loud gasp from Tsunade and a blank look from Anko. Are you saying that the father of my son is the Yondaime? She questioned. No, I'm not. You see, during his assault, Itachi damaged his eyes so badly that they had to be removed. When Tsunade found him, she had to transplant the eyes of Uchiha Shisui to stem the large amount of blood loss he was experiencing. I don't see why that is important. Kakashi has a Sharingan implanted in his head too. Anko growled. Yes, but Kakashi hasn't suddenly developed Uchiha genes. The third replied. What do you mean Uchiha genes? Anko questioned. Hear me out. When your son was born, he had darker hair, right? The third questioned. Yes, dark hair in my eyes. Anko said. After the QB was sealed, the boy I found had blonde hair and blue eyes, just like the Yondaime. In fact, he looks exactly like the Yondaime did at his age. Now, with the Uchiha genes, his hair is still blonde, but with black streak in it, and his eyes are going to be black. His DNA shares markers identical to Shisui, as well as the Yondaime. What I think happened was that Orochimaru succeeded in creating a bloodline that would absorb anything foreign that the body was subjected to into the DNA. That way, any descendants of the child would bear the traits as well. Sandaime concluded, I think that before my successor died, he may have transferred, either by accident or intentionally, some of his DNA into Naruto, giving him his former appearance. Wait, what about the QB? Does that mean that he is part demon or something? Tsunade asked, shocked at her sensei's analytical analysis of Naruto's abilities. My son isn't a demon, Anko said, loudly, glaring at the Sannin. Calm down, you two, the Sandaime said. If I am correct, Naruto must be subjected to someone's DNA to change. Since the QB is sealed inside of him, then there is no fear of him becoming a demon. Besides, we have a full DNA write-up. He's 100% human. But what's to stop someone from putting their blood into him? He'll keep on changing, and that won't be good. Anko worried that her son may end up with some kind of disorder before she got to know him. Well, for one, since the QB is healing him, it is safe to assume that the demon has some ability to regulate what is absorbed and what isn't. If he didn't have the QB, then I shudder to think what would happen. Sarutobi said, I believe that the ability is either fading or slowing down completely, because he adopted the genes of the fourth within a matter of minutes. But this time it took almost the entire 2 weeks he was unconscious for the changes to occur. Do you have those reports, Tsunade? Hi. His DNA had been slowly changing over the period of the past 2 weeks, and the changes were mostly minimal. I would need to run more tests, but I think that this ability is either being overwritten in his own DNA, or it is being stopped as to prevent further damage to the boy. The medic Nin deduced. Now, said the third Hokage, what do you say about meeting your son? Tsunade, Anko, and the Hokage made their way back to Naruto's hospital room. Anko was more than a bit nervous about meeting her son that she didn't know survived the Kyuubi attack for the first time. She was surprised that the Hokage had allowed her to regain custody of Naruto, since she was a former apprentice of Orochimaru, plus her son was the Kyuubi vessel. She had no doubt that life would be rough for the two, at least for a while. As the trio entered the room, they found the blonde asleep in the overly large bed, making his already malnourished frame seem even smaller. Anko let out a sob, seeing her son in his present condition. She quickly rushed to his side and held his sleeping form in her arms. Seeing mother and son reunited in such a fashion made both the Hokage and Tsunade smile. Tsunade went to check on his charts to see how he was progressing. After reading the clipboard attached to the end of the bed, her face fell into a frown, and she motioned for Sarutobi to follow her into the hallway. Sensei, no one has checked up on the boy since I finished with him, except for me and Shizun. Isn't there one doctor here who doesn't see him as the demon? She asked, her anger showing. The Sandaime let out a sigh and frowned. I was unaware that the staff harbored such a grudge against Naruto. Of course, this is his first time in the hospital, so I really had no previous knowledge of the staff's reaction, he said. Tsunade's scowl deepened as she heard two idiot nurses complaining about the demon brat. Tsunade, I have a request for you, Sarutobi said. I know that you have lost a lot of faith in this village, but I want you to come back. I would like you to be able to check on Naruto, since you are the only medic Nin not biased against him. If you don't want to take on the role of a ninja again, would you at least consider running the hospital? Tsunade stared at him with a glint of anger in her eyes. I'm sorry, Sensei, but that's not happening anytime soon. I'll stay until Naruto is well enough to leave with his mom, but after that I'm leaving again, she said. Suddenly a look of compassion washed over her young-looking face. But I will stop by a couple times a year to check on him and to make sure that his bloodline isn't acting up. Sarutobi just nodded and headed towards the room of Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke was lying in his bed, depressed after witnessing the brutal murder of his parents at the hands of his older brother, who had then used the Genjutsu Tsukiyomi, Moon Reader, which forced the 8-year-old to relive the murder of his entire clan for 3 days. Right now, the black-haired, black-eyed boy was laying on his side, staring out the window. How are you today, Sasuke-kun? Asked the old man. The boy simply looked over at him, but didn't say anything. He simply rolled back over and resumed moping. Sarutobi was greatly saddened by this turn of events. As the last remaining Uchiha that was loyal to Konoha, he was important to the survival of the Sharingan bloodline. Although, now that Naruto had incorporated it into his own DNA, there were now 2 people who could pass it on to their children. Sasuke, the Hokage started, there is someone I want you to meet. Naruto awoke to find himself in a dark, damp, creepy hallway, with pipes and a faint glow at the end of the hallway. Feeling an irresistible urge to follow, Naruto headed towards the light. When he arrived, he found himself facing a large gate, with a simple piece of paper stuck to the front of it that said seal. Suddenly, a large pair of blood-red eyes, with black slit pupils leered at the small boy. The first thing that ran through Naruto's mind was, what the hell, followed closely by an audible, what the hell? I can see again. Brat, that's because you aren't in the conscious world yet. You're in your mind. A deep voice echoed through the cavernous hallway. Who are you? Asked Naruto, staring into the red eyes without blinking. I am the great Kyuubi. The voice rang out. But you're dead. How can you be in my head? I must be dreaming. Naruto yelled and then muttered. Okay, I'll cut back from 5 bowls of ramen before bed to 4. I am most certainly not dead, the Kyuubi retorted. I was sealed inside of you by the one you call Yondaime. I am doomed to stay trapped in here until you die, thus taking me with you to the afterlife. Wait, you're sealed inside of me. Naruto's voice was full of shock and surprise. If this was the great demon that attacked Konoha, then that would explain why people always said mean things to him. You? You're the reason that everyone hates me, aren't you? You're the reason that no one will help me, and no one will let their kids play with me. You're the reason that I don't have any family. The boy screamed, tears beginning to flow from his eyes. Upon seeing the boy, who had stood up to more hardships in his short 7 years of life than most people did in a lifetime, begin to cry, the QB's eyes couldn't help but soften a bit. Yeah, kid, I'm the reason that everyone hates you. I'm the reason that they keep their offspring away from you. But I think you'll find that you are mistaken. I had nothing to do with your lack of family. The deep bass voice of the legendary fox rang out. What do you mean? I don't have a family. No one loves me enough to give me one, Naruto yelled. But suddenly, the cage began to dissolve around him, along with the background, and Naruto slowly felt himself wake up. Sarutobi and Sasuke entered a room to see a woman who had dark hair that almost looked purple, holding a boy with blonde hair and bandages over his eyes. Both were sleeping, the woman holding the blonde to her chin. That is Uzumaki Naruto. The bandages are from where your brother attacked him and hacked at his eyes. At this, Sasuke looked shocked. He knew that his brother was deranged, but hacking out the eyes of a child was wrong, even for a homicidal maniac. To save his life, a student of mine transplanted the eyes of one of your clansmen into Naruto. He'll have the Sharingan, and due to his bloodline limit, he will be able to pass it on to his children. The third explained. Hokage-sama, why are you doing this? Sasuke asked. The third smiled at the young Uchiha. Naruto is, or rather, was an orphan. The woman you see with him is his biological mother. Since Naruto was born during the Kyuubi attack, records were messed up and they were separated. I thought that since the two of you share the same bloodline, that we should keep you two together, that is, if you would like to. The third explained. Do you mean, live with them? Sasuke asked, with a hint of joy in his voice. If you want to, then yes. Anko is a jounin, so she has many difficult missions that may last a long time. If you were to join them, she wouldn't have to worry about Naruto while she was away. The third explained. I would like that a lot, if they would have me, Sasuke said, after only a few seconds of thought. The Sandaime just smiled and walked the boy back to his room. He would talk with Anko and Naruto about this later. If she refused, he could always make it a mission. Naruto could feel someone's arms around his shoulders in an embrace he was unfamiliar with. This wasn't some villager trying to kill him. There wasn't any pressure on his neck. This felt almost good. But no one loved him. Maybe it was the Hokage. Naruto shifted a bit, letting out a quiet groan from his stiff back muscles. He felt the person who was holding him recoil and gasp. I knew it, another person who hates me, Naruto thought. Suddenly the arms appeared again, this time in a full-fledged hug. Naruto heard the mystery person, sobbing on his shoulder, as they hugged him. Naruto normally would have pushed this person away, but something about the hug caught him off guard. He was too stunned to ask a question, although he quickly recuperated and was about to ask one, when he heard the door open, followed by a number of footsteps, and the protective arms of the mystery person retracted. Making up for lost time, Anko? The voice of the Hokage asked. Huh? Old man, who is this? Naruto asked, jabbing his thumb to his right, in what he hoped was the direction of the mysterious Anko. Naruto felt a hand encircle his as the mysterious person spoke. Naruto, I am. Anko choked on her words and couldn't finish them. Naruto, this is your mother, Mitarashi Anko. The Hokage said. What? I don't have a mom. You said so yourself. Naruto cried. I know, Naruto, but I was wrong. There are a few things I want to talk about, the first being your history, said Sarutobi. Wait, is this about the Kyuubi? Naruto asked. This completely shocked the two occupants in the room. How do you know about the Kyuubi? Asked the Hokage. I was just talking with the great big fuzzball. He told me about how the Yondaime sealed him inside of me, and how he was the reason the villagers hate me. Naruto replied. It is true that the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi in you to save the village, but that's not the only thing I wanted to talk with you about, said the Sandaime. Naruto, while you were unconscious, we ran some blood tests to try and find your parents. And it turns out that Anko is your mother. We also found out that you have a very unique bloodline limit. It allows you to absorb people's DNA into your own. You see, when you were born, you had much darker hair and brown eyes. But somehow, some of the Yandame's DNA got into you, which is why you look almost exactly like him. The Hokage said. Naruto just looked shocked, but since his eyes were still held shut, he couldn't stare in the correct direction. The Sandaime continued. Tsunade thinks that your bandages can come off in a day, so we will keep you here for the night. Now, I think that you should get to know your mother better. Without warning, Sarutobi left the two in the room alone, one just happy to know her child was alive, the other digesting the insane amount of information that was just leveled at him. While the two sat in awkward silence, Anko's hand snaked onto Naruto's head and began to stroke his hair. "Oh, Oka-san," gasped Naruto at the unfamiliar contact. "Hi, Naruto-kun, I'm your Ka-san," Anko said, trying to hold back tears. "I missed you, Oka-san," yawned Naruto, snuggling into the unfamiliar warmth of his mother and fell asleep. Anko didn't say anything. She just hugged her son tighter, her tears falling freely again. As the sun crept ever lower in the western sky, Anko moved Naruto into a more comfortable position in his bed and made her way into the hallway. She was hungry and headed towards the vending machine at the end of the hallway. She suddenly felt a presence spying on her from her right and looked over her shoulder at the offending person. She saw the Uchiha survivor looking at her from his room, saying goodbye to the Hokage. As she turned her attention back to her previous task, she felt the old Hokage come up behind her. "Hokage-sama, I want to thank you for allowing me to get my son back. Most of the village would like nothing more than for him to be dead, but I can't. I won't let that happen now," Anko said, in an unusually demure voice. "Think nothing of it, Anko. I wouldn't have it any other way. If anyone deserves a family, it is that boy above all others," Sarutobi said. "Actually, I have a question to ask of you. I know that motherhood will be a new experience for you, but I would like to keep the Sharingan bloodline together as much as possible. Naruto will hopefully brighten Sasuke's disposition, and Sasuke may be able to calm your son down a bit." "You're asking me to adopt the Uchiha?" asked Anko. She was shocked that she was being asked to guard possibly the most important bloodline in the entire village. "Yes, Sasuke has already expressed his wish to live with the two of you, should you wish to take him in. I'm afraid for him. You see, not only did Itachi murder his parents in front of his eyes, he's done caused the boy some serious mental trauma. I'm afraid of what would happen to him if he was left alone. All he seems to do is brood, but when I mentioned the possibility of a new family, his eyes picked up immediately," Sarutobi explained. I'm honored, Hokage-sama, but I'd have to talk with Naruto first," Anko said. "Of course," said the Sandaime. "Would you at least like to meet him?" he asked. Anko removed her purchase from the machine and nodded her head. "Well then, I'll bring him by tomorrow when Naruto gets his bandages off," Sarutobi said and left the hallway. Anko simply returned to her son's room to dream about life with a new family. The morning sun rose, and with it, Anko's eyelids. As she rubbed the sleep from her eyes, she looked at the sleeping form of her son. His blonde hair was streaked with lines of Uchiha black, and the new jeans had even given his normally unruly hair a bit of a lean, causing the hairs on the top of his head to lean towards his arms, although it was slight. The whisker marks which adorned his cheeks seemed to fade with the incorporation of his new jeans, but that might be a good thing. The less people recognized him, the better it would be. The sleeping boy was awoken around 9 o'clock by the entrance of the Sandaime Hokage, as well as the remaining Uchiha survivor. "Once Tsunade gets here, we will be able to remove the bandages," the old man explained. While the group was waiting, Naruto had tried to start up a conversation with Sasuke. He knew the boy from the academy, but that was as far as his knowledge went. Though it wasn't known to Naruto, Sasuke was doing the same thing. He wanted to find out all he could about his new brother. What he knew from the academy was limited, and it failed to do the blonde justice. Sasuke knew that Naruto had a reputation as being the dumbest boy in the class, who liked to play jokes and was very loud. But after talking with him, he realized that Naruto, for all his apparent shortcomings, was actually quite smart. Thinking over his short experience with the boy, he realized that most of the questions Naruto received and subsequently failed, were much too hard for most genin to answer. Actually, Sasuke didn't even know the answer to the questions the dobe received. Sasuke came to the conclusion that Naruto's lack of skill was due to his lack of a family. He hadn't had anyone to teach him any techniques or how to control his chakra. He had grown up alone, without the benefits or joys that family brings. The black-haired boy's next thought caught him off guard. If Naruto had never been trained, then how good would he be with supervision? While Naruto was the dead last at the academy, it wasn't by much. He might even be a worthy challenge for Sasuke, maybe even better than the Uchiha. The thought of this made the Uchiha smile. The boys' conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tsunade and her apprentice, Shizune, who would be departing the hidden village immediately following Naruto's dismissal from the hospital. She muttered something about a hangover and proceeded to unwrap the bandages surrounding Naruto's head. After the last bit of gauze was removed, Naruto slowly opened his eyes. At first, the unusual sensation of bright light hitting eyes stung for a while, but slowly they grew accustomed. The crowd in the room was looking at the boy expectantly, waiting to hear his reaction. Sasuke immediately saw the Uchiha eyes and noted with happiness that the boy looked almost like an Uchiha, with his darkly streaked hair and deep black eyes. He was happy that even if the person staring back at him wasn't a true Uchiha, that he had at least found someone who was like him. Naruto was just happy to have his sight back. He blinked a few times before taking note of the people in the room. He recognized the Hokage and Sasuke, but there were 3 new people in his room that he had never seen before, including his mother. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the purple-haired Jounin and stared into her brown eyes. Although he looked nothing like her, he knew instinctively that she was his mother. "Ka-san," the boy cried and quickly enveloped Anko in a fierce hug. "How do the eyes feel?" she asked, returning the hug. "They feel fine," the boy replied. "Can I see what they look like?" Tsunade pointed her thumb over towards a small mirror over the sink in a corner. Naruto leaped out of bed and quickly made his way over to the sink to check out his new appearance. The black eyes of Uchiha Shisui gazed back at the former blonde. The look seemed almost natural. The only sign that the eyes were transplanted were small scars around the corners of his eyes, where the originals had been removed. The left eye had a cross running downward towards the bridge of his nose, and the right eye had 2 scars forming a cross at the far corner. All in all, Naruto liked his new look. The eyes weren't his usual happy blue, but he liked them nonetheless. His hair was now streaked and more limp than before made him look a bit more mysterious, seeing as it actually hid some of his face. However, the thing he was most happy about was the fact that those ugly whisker marks had faded. Where there were once 3 lines, only 2 remained, making him look less like the fox that was trapped inside him. "This is so cool," Naruto said, responding to his new look. "I'm glad to hear that you like your new look, Naruto." The Sandaime said, "I have a question for you. I want to know how you would feel having Sasuke as your brother." "You mean, since he's an orphan too, you wanted him to live with Ka-san and me?" the 7-year-old asked. The Sandaime chuckled to himself, seeing how intelligent Naruto could be. "Yes, I would like for your mother and you to adopt Sasuke, so that all of you can have a family, even after such tragic events." "That would be so cool. What do you think, Ka-san?" the loudmouth asked, heading back to be closer to his mother. "I don't mind as long as you don't," Anko responded, smiling at her sons, ruffling their hair. "Now, I believe, there is the matter of getting used to your new eyes," the Hokage said. "Naruto, you'll need help to use your eyes correctly, and there isn't any real point in separating you two since it would be nice if you both activated the Sharingan. I'll have some specialized training set up for the 2 of you starting next week. Until then, I suggest you get to know each other better." The old man smiled and exited the door, leaving the 3-person family alone for the first time since its conception. 1 week later, the 2 boys found themselves waiting to meet their new sensei. He was currently running a good hour and a half late, and both boys were beginning to wonder if he'd ever show up. "Yo, sorry I'm late. You see, there was this kitten, and it was caught in a tree," a voice said, approaching the 2 young ninjas in training. The 2 looked at the newcomer with identical stares of both disbelief and anger. He was a tall man with gray hair, although he wasn't old, and it stuck up in many different angles, not unlike Naruto's old hair. He was wearing dark pants and a dark shirt under the standard issue Jounin vest, as well as black fingerless gloves that had a metal plate on the back of the hand to block swords. The most peculiar aspect of the man was his Konoha head protector was pulled over his left eye, completely obscuring it, and he wore a mask that effectively covered his face and nose. "You two are Sasuke and Naruto, I assume?" The silver-haired man asked the bewildered boys. They just nodded their heads looking at their sensei. He seemed, well, they didn't know how he seemed. There was something about him. He seemed dangerous, even if he was an hour and a half late. "Why don't we introduce ourselves? You can tell us your likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, those kinds of things." "I'll start off. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I don't feel like telling you my likes or dislikes, my dreams for the future. I have a lot of hobbies." He finished, giving absolutely no detail in his cryptic answer. Great. All we learned was his name. The boys thought to themselves, "Well, my name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like my family and training. I have a few things that I don't like, my hobbies, I guess I don't really have any. As for my dreams, I want to start my own family, and I want to help my family accomplish their goals." The raven-haired boy said. He didn't mention Itachi. I guess that's a good thing. Kakashi thought. "My name is Mitarashi Naruto. I like my family and ramen. I dislike the 3-minute wait for the ramen to cook. My hobbies are training with my brother and mom and trying all the different types of ramen that I can find. My dream is to become the Hokage and help my family with their dreams." He finished. Ramen-obsessed boy, but he's got a hard dream. Kakashi thought. He stared at the boys before him. Sasuke in his usual blue t-shirt and shorts with the red and white Uchiha fan on the back, and Naruto, who had taken to wearing black shorts with a bunch of pockets on them, with a white shirt. The interesting thing about the shirt was the clan symbol on the back. It seemed to be a mixture of the orange swirl he had donned under the name of Uzumaki Naruto and the Uchiha fan. It was an orange and red swirl, divided just as the Uchiha fan was. "Well, my job for the time being is to help you two learn to harness the power of the Sharingan. Sasuke, since you haven't awoken yours yet, we'll be doing drills and exercises to help you, and Naruto, since you have fully developed Sharingan already, you just need to learn to use the correct amount of chakra to activate them. You'll be doing mostly chakra control exercises. Both of you will do drills with me until you get the hang of the Sharingan," Kakashi explained. After their first day of practice, Kakashi pulled Sasuke aside, since Naruto was being stubborn and still practicing his chakra control. "Sasuke, I don't wish to bring up a potentially sore subject, but when I agreed to take on this assignment, I was given a psychological evaluation, and it said that, when you were admitted to the hospital, you were set on killing your brother, but today you didn't mention him. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened? Was the report wrong?" Sasuke glared at his instructor before sighing. "No, when I moved in with Naruto and Anko, I was pretty set on killing him." Flashback. Sasuke was unpacking his belongings into his new room, which he shared with Naruto. Anko's apartment wasn't that big, and they were looking for a larger place to live, but for now it was her apartment or nothing. Naruto was moving his stuff into the room as well, and Sasuke was shocked to find that everything of value that Naruto had could easily fit into a backpack. "Naruto," Sasuke said, breaking the silence of the room. "I understand that my brother attacked you, but Itachi is mine to kill. If you get in the way, then I may be forced to kill you. Don't get in my way," the brooding boy warned. Naruto looked at his new brother like he had some kind of marine animal stuck to his face. "I don't care. You can kill him if you want." He shrugged. Now it was Sasuke's turn to be perplexed. "How can you not want revenge for what he did to you?" he asked. "Oh, it's not that I don't want revenge, but it comes second. I don't know about you, but revenge isn't going to control what I do, so you don't have to worry about me getting in the way," Naruto explained. "You obviously don't get it. I have to kill him. I am an Uchiha, and I must avenge my family. It's all my fault that they died. I couldn't do anything." At this, Sasuke began to break down a bit, and tears came to his eyes. "Sasuke, it's not your fault. You're in the academy, learning to be a ninja, and he's ANBU. There's nothing that you could have done. If you had been there to help them, you would have died too," Naruto said. Sasuke crossed the room in a second and pinned Naruto against the wall. You don't get it, do you? He hissed. I'm an Uchiha. I must avenge my clan. No, I do get it. You think that because you're from this clan, that you must avenge their deaths. You forget that your brother is also an Uchiha. This simply confused Sasuke even more. What the hell are you talking about? He asked the boy, trying to calm himself down. Look, you know how to cross-multiply numbers, right? Naruto asked him. Sasuke merely nodded his head, not understanding where this was going. So you know that when you cross-multiply, like terms will cancel each other out. Think about it. You're an Uchiha in the academy. He's an Uchiha in ANBU. If you could cross-multiply the two, then you're stuck with an academy student against an ANBU. You never would have stood a chance. Naruto articulated. This struck Sasuke deep. He hadn't thought of his life in such a scientific way before. It made so much sense. Look, Sasuke, I'm not telling you to abandon your goal, but you shouldn't worry about it until you can match him. I'm sure one day, you'll see him again and be able to kill him, but that won't be until you're at least a Chunin, more than likely, not until you're a Jounin. Don't worry about it for now and focus on other things. Naruto simply left the room to find his mom and give Sasuke some room to think. In flashback, Sasuke retold the story of Naruto's logic to Kakashi, who was very impressed by the dead last's ability to change Sasuke so easily. It's not a good thing to be an Avenger. Avengers lead a life of pain and suffering. They live for one reason, and if they ever accomplish their goal, they are left with a feeling of emptiness and despair. They become so caught up in their own world that they become social outcasts and loners. It is not a life that I wish upon anyone. With that, Kakashi dismissed the boys for the day. The boys walked back to their apartment at a quick pace, hoping to make it back in time to shower before dinner. The looks that they received were surprising to Sasuke, especially the first time he noticed them. He was used to people recognizing him, because he was from the Uchiha clan, but the looks people gave Anko and Naruto, they made him shiver every once in a while. At first it was simply at Anko. She brushed it off, scowling at the people foolish enough to make a remark behind her back. He wasn't able to hear what they were talking about, except for the word snake. After a while, the looks began to move towards Naruto. Even after the changes he went through, people recognized who he was. Sasuke was taken by surprise the sneers and glares he received. It surprised him just as much when Naruto brushed them away by smiling at them. Flashback. It was the day after Sasuke's minor blow-up at Naruto, and the boys were sitting around their new apartment, waiting for Anko to return from shopping. Hey, Naruto, why didn't you go with your mom? Sasuke asked. He himself hadn't gone because he was still digesting the conversation he had had yesterday. Well, I didn't want mom to have any more problems, he said, rather cryptically. What do you mean? How could you cause problems for her? The full-blooded Uchiha asked his brother. Naruto looked at his feet, swinging them in front of his body. You saw the way people look at me, right? He asked, keeping his eyes rooted on the floor. Yeah. They look at me like that because I have the QB sealed inside of me, he said quietly. Suddenly, his voice took a much more serious tone. Look, I don't care if you hate me, but if you use that to hurt Kasan, then I'll kill you. Sasuke was shocked. The reason that Naruto had grown up without any kind of care was that he had a demon sealed inside of him? That didn't make any sense. But that would explain the looks the younger boy received, as well as Anko. As the mother of the QB vessel, she was probably seen as an anathema. Not to mention the hisses he heard yesterday, first calling his adopted mother a snake, and then openly hating his adopted brother. Naruto, I don't hate you. It's just a lot to take in, Sasuke stammered. The rest of the day was spent in silence, waiting for Anko to return with dinner. She seemed to notice the look on her son's face, as well as the look of heavy contemplation that graced Sasuke's face. When she asked what was wrong, Naruto denied that anything was amiss, and Sasuke simply shook his head. That night, when the boys were lying in their room, sleep had decided to fail them. Hey Naruto. Sasuke started to speak, but paused for a second. I don't hate you for the QB. I think you're actually pretty brave to put up with all the stuff you do. Naruto turned over to the boy and, although Sasuke couldn't see him, stared at the boy. Then Naruto returned to his previous position and tried to go back to sleep. Before he managed to find refuge, though, he said, Thanks, Sasuke. You're the first person I've told besides the Hokage and Kasan, so this means a lot to me. The boys remained silent for the remainder of the night, before finally falling asleep. In flashback. After that day, the three people living under the roof of Anko's apartment could actually feel like a family. Sasuke and Naruto acting as each other's brother, and Anko as a mother to Naruto and a surrogate mother to Sasuke. That night Sasuke had made a decision that he would protect his new family. He didn't know that Naruto had done the same thing. The next few months passed quickly for the two boys. Between the academy and their training with Kakashi, they had little time for other activities. They would attend the academy until 3 in the afternoon, and then train with Kakashi until 5 or 6, and then return for dinner. Anko proved to be a very capable mother, caring for her two sons and keeping up with her duties as a jounin. She would often be seen sparring with Naruto and Sasuke, or simply chasing them if they were running late for any reason. As remarkable as Anko's transformation was, the most noticeable changes were in Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke had, for the moment, given up on avenging his family and embraced his foster mother and brother. Without feeling the need to measure up to his murderous brother, he became almost social. He still abhorred the attention he received from his fangirls, but he would make attempts to meet the other people in his class. It had taken him a while, but almost 5 weeks of constant training and different combat scenarios with Kakashi and Naruto had awoken his Sharingan. It wasn't complete, but he wasn't expecting it to be, and was actually quite happy when he noticed that his right eye had 2 of the strange coma-like marks in them instead of 1. Naruto had changed the most. With the love of his mother and the attention of his brother, he quickly gave up his prankster ways and devoted himself to both his schoolwork and training. It had taken him almost as long as Sasuke to reawaken the Sharingan, but he finally did, if only 1 day before his brother. He was leading a happy life now, and a large part of that was due, in part, to Sasuke. Before, the majority of the village had harbored grudges or hatred against the boy, but now about half of the village was reconsidering their previous opinions. One half of the village was convinced that Naruto had conned the remaining Uchiha into being his brother, while the other half were convinced that Sasuke could do no wrong and thus accepted Naruto as part of society. After the training with Kakashi ended, the boys continued to train together and further their skills. Sasuke remained entrenched at the top of the class, but Naruto was quickly climbing the ladder and was closing in on the middle of the class. Naruto was constantly trying to find out if he had absorbed any more bloodline limits, so far unsuccessfully, and learning how to integrate the Sharingan and some of his new katan techniques into his fighting style. Naruto had never learned any type of rigid taijutsu style, and he liked that. It gave him an unpredictability that he found helpful. Sasuke had continued to train in the basic academy taijutsu, but he did thrown in some moves he learned from Anko and Naruto to give his arsenal more variety. He had also picked up Anko's love of kunai and other throwing weapons. He didn't have the experience that his adoptive mother did in close-range combat. His throwing accuracy wasn't bad, and he consistently hit his mark with little or no effort. It was during one of Sasuke's throwing exercises that Naruto finally discovered another bloodline. Once again, Sasuke was trying to throw 10 kunai and have them deflect of each other to hit 10 separate targets. He had gotten to the point where he could hit 8 or 9, but the 10th continuously eluded him. Jumping into the air, he took a breath to calm himself down and focus on his task before he released the throwing knives. Sweeping his arms out, Sasuke released the metallic objects from between his fingers and began to right himself for his descent towards the ground. Clink, 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 clink. The knives bounced off of each other, and Sasuke ventured a look at their trajectory. With 9 simultaneous thuds, 9 of the kunai embedded themselves into the intended targets. Damn, still only 9. Now where is that other one? He thought. He heard the yelp of his brother and figured that his kunai might have gone off course more than he had thought. What he saw confused the Uchiha to no end. Naruto was sitting in the shade of a large tree, and there, not a foot in front of the younger boy's face, was the kunai, floating in midair. Old man, Naruto yelled as he burst into the office of the Hokage. Something happened, and we don't know what it was, but it was cool. We figured you would know, so we came here. Upon hearing the "we" in the statement, Sasuke walked into the room. Why don't you tell me what happened, and I'll see if I can help you boys. The venerable Hokage said, smiling at the close kinship the two shared. I was taking a break from climbing trees when one of Sasuke's kunai came flying at me. I panicked because I didn't have time to block it, so I put my arm out like this. He raised his right hand in a warding motion, while he used his left arm to cover his head, and when I didn't get hit, I looked, and it was just floating in the air. This confused the Hokage. He had never heard of something like this. Is it a kind of chakra shield? He asked. No, we figure out that it could only repel metal objects. I tried throwing different things at Naruto, and the pebbles, dirt clods, and my sandal all got through, but he can stop kunai and shuriken in midair. Sasuke explained. That's why we came here. Either it has something to do with metal, magnets, or this field only stops deadly things. The Hokage thought about this for a minute. I have an idea how we can find out. He took out one of his many paper weights and laid it in front of Naruto. Try to change the shape of this, if you can, Naruto, he said. Naruto concentrated on the paper weight, which was shaped like a leaf, and willed it to become a simple block. Nothing happened. He tried for 5 minutes, concentrating on the leaf and willing it to change, but it never did. Well, I think we can say that your ability isn't to control metal, the Sandaime explained. I also think that your own tests show that it isn't some kind of force field, so I believe, Naruto, that you have a very rare bloodline that was originally from Sunagakure. Their Sandaime had the ability to control magnetic forces and used it to control small pieces of metal for his jutsu. Naruto and Sasuke stood there with their mouths agape and stared wide-eyed at the gray-haired man. That is so cool, Naruto yelled in triumph. I have a bloodline of a Kazekage. Yes, I suggest that you practice both repelling and attracting different things. It could come in handy someday. The Sandaime suggested. In the meantime, I believe that your mother should be arriving shortly to turn in her report, so why don't you two just wait here for a while? True to his word, Anko walked into the office not 3 minutes later to deliver her report. It was a straightforward mission, guarding the Fire Country's daimyo from a missing nin. It wasn't very hard, and she finished early. When Naruto explained about his new bloodline, Anko smirked and ruffled his hair. All right, from now on I expect to have to try during our kunai duels. This earned a groan from Naruto, who hadn't inherited his mother's love of kunai, much to her disappointment. Naruto's birthday, October 10th, rolled around rather quickly. He still hadn't perfected using his magnetic abilities, but he was getting better. Dawn came early, and the boys were awoken by Anko's usual greeting, a bucketful of cold water. After a quick warm-up, read, 5 hours of being chased by your mother, who is throwing kunai at you. The trio headed home for brunch. As the day wore on, both Sasuke and Anko noticed that Naruto was more and more reluctant to leave the apartment. They figured it had to do with the QB, and when they asked him, he explained that the villagers always hated him more today and had grown accustomed to staying inside to minimize contact with drunk and/or irate villagers. Anko decided to stay and comfort her son more that night, and so Sasuke was the only one to go out to enjoy the festival, although it was rather subdued now that he knew of Naruto's burden. He watched as the smaller children ran around, enjoying the games and food of the festival. In reality, Sasuke was appalled by the villagers' treatment of Naruto. He had only come out to honor the Uchiha who had died in the attack, and then he planned on returning back to the apartment. After a nice speech by the Hokage, Sasuke walked back towards the apartment, passing different restaurants along the way. He heard different people talking in various states of inebriation about different worries, from raising their kids to the state of the village. Once he returned home, he joined his adoptive mother and brother for dessert before he headed to bed. As he was taking his dishes over to the sink, he looked out the window at the sky, noting the new moon. But what interested him the most was the group of flickering orange lights that were making their way towards the apartment building. He didn't immediately recognize the glow of torches, simply passing them off as part of the festivities, but he did seem to recognize the silver-haired Chunin leading a group of 20 or 30 people. What is Mizuki-sensei doing? He thought. It wasn't until he heard the shouts of, "Kill the demon." Then it hit him. Shit. Anko-ka-san, there's a mob outside. Sasuke yelled in warning. What? The purple-haired Jounin yelled as the door to the apartment was kicked in. The first person in the doorway was greeted by a kunai to the shoulder, courtesy of an enraged mother. The second person met a similar fate, this time from Sasuke. Mizuki forced his way towards the door, loosing shuriken as he entered and multiplying them with Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, Shadow Shuriken technique. He was absolutely dumbfounded when the multitude of metal seemed to slow and hover in midair. "You will not hurt Kaisen," Naruto screamed and repelled the shuriken back towards the mass of now shocked villagers. Mizuki was able to use a Kawarimi no Jutsu, replacement technique, to avoid the multitude of steel-throwing stars. Shuriken are not as lethal as kunai, unless they embed themselves in the throat or head, so damage to the mob was minimal. However, the only person standing was Mizuki, who took the moment of shock to organize another attack on the demon. He knew he couldn't hope to beat a jounin like Anko, so he decided to try and burn out the three ninja. Katon, Gakakyu no Jutsu. Fire type, Grand Fireball technique. Mizuki then unleashed a very large ball of fire towards the apartment, only for his fireball to be doused by two cries of Swait Unsujin Hiki. Water type, Water Barrier, from Naruto and Sasuke. How do you know that? Mizuki stammered as he froze upon seeing the boys perform the jutsu. Then he noticed that both boys had red eyes with comma marks circling the iris. SSH Sharingan. That's not possible. He watched as Naruto raised his right arm and leveled it at him, while Sasuke simply smirked at his brother's antics. Suddenly, Mizuki felt his arms begin to fall asleep. Then his legs, and the last thing he remembered before he passed out was wondering what the hell was going on. Very quickly, Yinbiyu swarmed Anko's apartment, and before too long the Hokage appeared a look of grim anger on his face as he watched the Yinbiyu round up the members of the incapacitated mob. He walked over to Anko, who was checking on her sons, making sure they were okay. "Would you three be able to tell me what happened?" the old man asked. "Hokage-sama," Sasuke began, stifling a yawn due to exhaustion. "These people were trying to kill Naruto." His eyes drooped into sleep as he was talking. The Hokage noticed that Naruto was also drifting off to sleep, so he suggested that Anko move them to bed, and that she give the report after that was done. After moving the two into their beds, a very angry Anko moved back towards the living room and addressed the Hokage. "Hokage-sama, those people broke down the door and were calling for my son's head, so Sasuke and I defended our home. Then that Chunin used Kage Shuriken no Jutsu, and Naruto stopped them with his new bloodline before throwing them back at the crowd. That put most of them out of commission, but Mizuki managed to get out of the way and tried to burn down the apartment. Naruto and Sasuke were able to stop him using Suijin Hiki, and then I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I think Naruto used his magnetic bloodline again to do something to Mizuki and made him pass out." Anko spat, incensed that people would be prejudiced against her son in such a manner. The fact that the two boys were able to use a jutsu like the water barrier was astounding to the Hokage. "Anko, where did they get the water for the jutsu from?" he asked, perplexed. "I guess from the sink. Sasuke left it on because they broke through the door," she replied, picking up some things that had been scattered by the intrusion. "To be able to keep a technique like that up at their age, I believe that we can expect them to grow up to be very strong," the Hokage remarked. The day following the mob attack on Naruto dawned with gray skies, threatening to pour rain, and an unusual humidity for the fall weather. Both boys were sleeping soundly when Anko decided to wake them up around 8 in the morning. After their display last night, they deserved to rest up. Quickly shaking Naruto and Sasuke awake, she hurried them out of bed and told them that breakfast was ready and that they had matters to discuss. The boys entered the small kitchen/dining room after a few minutes and, rubbing the sleep from their eyes, muttered a thanks as they accepted their breakfast of cereal and toast. "First off," Anko started, her face holding no emotion, "I want to congratulate the two of you on your performance last night. The way you boys were able to use the water barrier at your age shows great potential and chakra control. Secondly, I want to know what you did to Mizuki." She spat out the silver-haired man's name like she was cursing. The boys exchanged sheepish glances, which were quickly covered by mischievous grins. "Well, ever since I discovered the magnetic bloodline, I was looking for a way to attack people directly with it. I've been trying to pull the iron from the ground and tried to do the same thing to humans. But since I can't go and try it on people, I haven't gotten very far. Last night, I think I used the fox's power, and that was how I was able to beat Mizuki. Naruto explained. If nothing else, Naruto had adopted his mother's ideals about hating people. If they crossed him wrong like last night, they were forever an anathema, and he would treat them as such. I just wish he would have used some cool jutsu, so I could have copied them, Sasuke complained. This elicited a laugh from everyone, and the mood switched to lighter conversation before the boys had to leave for school. Life settled down and fell into routine for the three. 2 years passed without incident, and the boys were starting their, hopefully, final year in the academy. The two had grown up and closer together than anyone could have hoped for. Sasuke had grown close to 5 feet 3 inches and showed no signs of slowing down, while Naruto was smaller, at 4 feet 11 inches, but was a bit quicker than his brother, who was physically stronger. That day at the academy, the class was reviewing the different techniques that they might have to demonstrate at their graduation exam. The selected skill today was the Hinge no Jutsu, or transformation. As Iruka-sensei called each member of the class up to change into a copy of him, he couldn't be more proud of his students. They were easily one of the best overall groups he had ever taught. Haruno Sakura, the brown-haired Chunin, called out. The pink-haired Sasuke fangirl quickly moved to the front of the class and formed the correct hand seals before calling out Hinge. A puff of smoke appeared, and after it disappeared, a perfect copy of Iruka smiled back at the teacher. Very good, Sakura, he admonished the girl. Next up is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto made his way down the rows of desks and stood in the front of the class. It had been decided after much arguing and yelling that Naruto should keep the name Uzumaki, since Orochimaru would come back for the boy if he found out he was alive. The only people who knew him as Mitarashi Naruto were Sasuke, Anko, Iruka, Kakashi, and the Hokage. Iruka had originally been skeptical of allowing the QB container into the academy. However, after seeing how hard the boy worked and how he interacted with the other students, he grew to like the energetic boy. Naruto adopted the classic Sasuke pose and slouched a bit before performing the technique perfectly. Good job, Naruto. Next up, Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke sauntered to the front in his typical lazy/I don't care type of manner before lazily forming the seals. No one noticed the unusual twinkle in the raven-haired boy's eyes before it was too late. Henge, the boy said, in a very lazy manner. It was so lazy that it made Shikamaru seem energetic and playful. As the smoke cleared, the sight of a naked woman with black hair greeted Iruka. As his nose erupted in a fountain of blood, he could only think one sentence. The hell? I figured Naruto or Kiba would try something like that, but Sasuke. The class erupted in laughter from the male population and indignation from the females of the class. They couldn't bring themselves to believe that their beloved Sasuke-kun would do something so perverted. In another cloud of smoke, Sasuke returned to normal and broodingly walked back to his seat. Or rather, he walked back to Naruto's seat. As Iruka got back up from the floor with wads of tissue stuck up his nose to prevent further blood loss, he noticed the two Sasukes and groaned. He had been pranked. He watched as the second Sasuke disappeared in a cloud of smoke and was replaced by Naruto, who promptly doubled over in laughter at his teacher's expense. Kami, Iruka-sensei, you should have seen the look on your face when I did that. The blonde and black-haired youth cried out in laughter, rolling in the aisle. That night was interesting, to say the least. Anko was torn between outrage and maternal pride at her son's antics. She was very proud of the fact that he could keep up 2 illusions, which admittedly were his worst skill, and that he had pulled such an elaborate and hilarious ruse. On the other hand, he had done something perverted, and like all women, Anko despised perverts. She settled on increasing the ferocity in her training. Neither Sasuke nor Naruto showed up to class without sporting new cuts from their mother's kunai. Okay, today we're going to be reviewing the Bunshin no Jutsu. Clone technique, Iruka explained. Naruto groaned. Bunshin was his worst skill. It wasn't that he didn't know how. He had copied the seals with his Sharingan and practiced the technique for hours, but he simply couldn't do it correctly, and for the life of him, he couldn't figure out why. Sasuke didn't know what was wrong, and his mother wasn't much more help. She figured that it had to do with his abnormally large amount of chakra and, in comparison, his poor chakra control. Truthfully, Naruto had been practicing his control since he started training with Kakashi, but with all his extra chakra, he always seemed to be behind the others. Suddenly, inspiration struck him well, it struck him. He'd ask the old man. He'll know what to do. After class, Naruto told Sasuke to go on home without him and that he had something to talk with the Hokage about. Sasuke was about to follow his brother anyway, but was sidetracked when a group of fangirls began to chase after him. Naruto headed towards the Hokage's office and asked to see the old man. The secretary told him to wait, because the Hokage was in a meeting and couldn't be disturbed. As the meeting ended, representatives from the surrounding villages exited the office and Naruto walked past them all into the Sandame's office. "Hey, I've got a problem," Naruto said, when he saw that he had the Hokage's attention. "I can't do a bunshin and I can't figure out why. Mom thinks it's 'cause I've got such high amounts of chakra, but she's not sure. Can you perform the technique for me?" asked the gray-haired leader. Naruto performed the technique and was rewarded with 3 dead and deformed clones. Yes, I would agree with your mother. You do have too much chakra," the Sandame said. "Now, Naruto, there are other forms of the bunshin that are actually more useful. There's the Mizu bunshin that creates a solid clone out of water, and the Tsuchi bunshin is made of earth. These require more chakra than normal, so you should be able to do those without problem. The only problem is that we don't have any way to teach you those particular techniques. If you ever encounter them, do me a favor and copy them. That way we can write them down." The old man chuckled at the joke. "The only other variation we have of the bunshin is the Kage bunshin, shadow clone, which takes up a large amount of chakra, but it creates solid clones. Unfortunately, since it uses such a large amount of chakra, it would be a bad idea to try and copy it, so you will have to learn it the old-fashioned way. Now it is a kinjutsu, so I can't just give you a copy of the jutsu, but if you'll stop by my office, say, this weekend, I will teach you how to perform the jutsu." Naruto sat in a chair and stared at the old man. He was going to learn a kinjutsu. Plus, he would be able to pass the graduation exam this way. "Okay, I'll stop by over the weekend to learn this jutsu. See you later, old man," Naruto exclaimed as he exited the office. That weekend, Naruto returned to the office of the Hokage to learn the forbidden technique Kage Bunshin. It turned out to be easier than he expected, but the old man didn't lie when he said it used a lot of chakra. The principle behind the skill was simple enough. Take a normal bunshin and put about 10 times more chakra than necessary to create one clone, and then another 3 or 4 times as much chakra to sustain it for any reasonable length of time. In the end, it was very easy to see why it was forbidden. He had agreed to show Sasuke, but both boys realized that the full-blooded Uchiha didn't have the chakra reserves necessary to perform the technique. However, the two did find another form of solid bunshin they could both use. They were watching some of the different shinobi of the village train and found Kakashi was dueling with a green spandex-clad man with thick eyebrows and a bowl cut, except that Kakashi was a Mizu bunshin. The two boys then conned the lazy jounin into showing them the technique, which they learned and used in their training routines. Time moved quickly after that weekend. The two boys continued to train, although they also found time to do other activities. Both Naruto and Sasuke had become friends quickly with Shikamaru and Chuji, although it was mostly Naruto who hung out with the lazy boy and the potato chip-addicted preteen. Sasuke had struck up a rivalry with Hyuga Neji, the previous year's #1 rookie, and seemed to be competing against each other in just about everything. After nearly 3 straight years of being rejected by Sasuke, many of his fangirls decided on another tactic. They tried to become friends with Naruto, Shikamaru, and Chuji. Naruto hasn't been able to walk through town without being hounded for the last 4 months, while the other two boys have only recently become targets. Luckily for them, or terribly unlucky for Naruto, Shikamaru's laziness and Chuji's constant eating seemed to be turn-offs in their own right, while Naruto couldn't claim any of the previous self-defense mechanisms and was sorely tempted to try his mother's tactics and begin to throw kunai indiscriminately. The graduation exams rolled around, and as expected, Sasuke was slated to become Rookie of the Year, while the position of top kunoichi was in a heated argument between Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura, both of whom were gigantic Sasuke fangirls. Naruto was moving between the top half and top quarter of the class, largely due to his poor effort on written assignments, as he often responded when asked about his poor grades. Who cares what the middle name of the Nidame's brother's third youngest sister was? And who cares if Tsunade of the legendary Sannin is the granddaughter of the show dame? I mean, honestly, when will that ever save my life? Of course, what people fail to notice while he is ranting on like this is the fact that he knew that Tsunade was A, part of the legendary Sannin, and B, was the granddaughter of the first Hokage. It was during one of these rants that he actually got to know Shikamaru, after the lazy genius noticed that Naruto knew those facts. While Naruto may have given up physical pranking for the most part, he still loved to mess with people's heads. As Naruto entered the exam room, he felt confident that he would pass. Before he would have been worried sick over his inability to perform a bunshin, but now he was able to two different kinds of bunshin. He felt very sure in himself. Okay, Naruto, you have to perform a bunshin to pass, Iruka said. Deciding to play it relatively safe, Naruto created 3 Mizu bunshin from the glass of water on Iruka's desk. Congratulations, you pass, Iruka said, after he found his voice again and handed him a Konoha forehead protector. After that, there was time for celebration. The next day, Naruto and Sasuke showed up for their Genin team assignments. I'd like to congratulate all of you for passing the exam. You are all true shinobi of Konohagakure and should always wear the symbol of the leaf with pride, Iruka explained as he began assigning teams. It wasn't until he reached Team 7 that Naruto paid any attention. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto. At this, the two brothers exchanged high fives and head nods in silent approval. And Haruno Sakura. Iruka finished. Team 8 will be. But before Iruka could continue, he was cut off by Sakura's voice. Iruka-sensei, why am I on a team with Naruto? Won't that make the teams unbalanced? She asked in a way that made it sound less insulting than it really was. Normally you'd be right, Sakura, but Sasuke was the #1 rookie. Naruto ended up around the middle of the class, and although you are the second-ranked kunoichi, all of the teachers thought you could learn the most from being with Sasuke and Naruto. Iruka explained. Now, Team 8 will be Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inuzuka Kiba. Team 9. And with that, Naruto quit paying attention again. However, he was rudely interrupted from his lazing when Team 10 was announced. Team 10, Nara Shikamaru, Akimichi Chuji, and Yamanaka Ino. This got a groan of displeasure from Shikamaru and Ino. Your Jounin senseis will be here shortly to collect your teams, Iruka explained before leaving the room as various Jounin came into the room and picked up teams. Eventually, the only team left was Team 7. Sakura was trying to talk with Sasuke, who had created a Mizu bunshin and then used a basic camouflage jutsu to hide while he sat with Naruto, who was somewhere in between sleeping and daydreaming. 2.5 hours later, a very late Kakashi entered the room, only to be hit on the head with an eraser. He was then forced to dodge 2 kunai, thrown by Sasuke and Naruto, while Sakura simply tried to stammer an apology for her rude and childish teammate, completely ignoring the fact that Sasuke had also thrown a kunai at the Jounin, and if anything was aiming to do more damage than Naruto, since he was aiming for Kakashi's family jewels. Well, my first impression of you guys is, I really don't like you, the pepper-haired Jounin replied. Meet me on the roof. With that, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. When the 3 Genin arrived at the roof, they found Kakashi sitting on a ledge, reading one of his perverted books. He noticed that Naruto and Sasuke arrived first, followed by a very wet and very angry Sakura. What happened? The Jounin asked. She tried to hug a Mizu bunshin, came Naruto's reply, his face creeping into a large grin, which was mirrored by Sasuke. Anyway, why don't you all introduce yourselves, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, those kinds of things. Kakashi ordered. Why don't you go first? Asked a drenched Sakura. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I don't feel like telling you my likes. My dislikes are personal. As for dreams for the future, I suppose I have a couple of hobbies. Okay, you're up, Pinky. My name is Haruno Sakura. My likes are, she glanced at Sasuke. My dream for the future, glanced at Sasuke again. My hobbies, stared at Sasuke. I hate Naruto and Ino Pig. Oh great, a love-struck fangirl. How come all the kunoichi these days only care about boys? Why couldn't I have gotten one like that girl guy has? She's very talented and useful. Kakashi's sweat dropped. For the first time in his life, he actually envied Mato guy. The world was ending. He was sure of it. Okay, one of you two. I don't really care which one, he said and motioned towards Naruto and Sasuke. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like my family. I dislike, no I hate, my fangirls. I don't have any hobbies. My dream is to start my own family and to help Kasan. Of course this is what Sakura heard. I like my family and Sakura. I want to marry Sakura and love her for all of eternity. This caused her to try and hug the Uchiha again, only to find herself hugging Kakashi, who Sasuke had used as a replacement. This, it was safe to say, caused Naruto to fall to the ground laughing harder than ever, clutching his sides. Haha, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. Ha. I like ramen and my family. I dislike anyone who would hurt my family. My hobbies are trying out new ramen flavors and training, and I want to become Hokage and Ha help my family achieve their dreams, he stated, his words turning into fits of laughter every once in a while. Well, that's it for introductions. Meet me tomorrow at 7 o'clock at Training Ground 32 for survival training, Kakashi exclaimed as he went to leave. But then he noticed that both boys had their Sharingan active, hoping to copy the technique he used to teleport away earlier. He decided to simply take the stairs. As he walked away, he heard the angered cries from the two. Damn you! We will figure out how you do that cool technique. Sakura was very angry. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and neither her teammates nor Sensei was at the training grounds. Sure, Kakashi had shown up late yesterday, but surely he wouldn't do the same thing twice, right? Wrong. Not only was he late, he was even later than yesterday. Not to mention the fact that Naruto and Sasuke weren't there yet either. Just as she was about to storm out of the area and find her tardy teammates, the two boys in question appeared on the edge of the area, chatting and walking at a relaxed pace. Seeing the two walk in so casually made Sakura's already boiling blood bubble over. What the hell are you two doing? She screamed at the boys when they came in range of her voice. You're 2 hours late. Oh, Sasuke-kun, did that baka slow you down? I know you wouldn't be late if he didn't. She gushed at her crush. The pair was saved from answering her by the arrival of their gray-haired sensei. Yo, Kakashi greeted the team with his standard introduction. You're late, Sakura bellowed at the jounin. Well, you see, there was this dog attacking a mime, and he couldn't call for help, so I had to spend the next hour trying to decipher his gestures. He wasn't very good. Then when I took him to the hospital, he still refused to talk, even to give his name and other information, so that took a while. Kakashi explained. You're lying, Sakura accused bitterly. Anyway, your test is to get these from me before this timer goes off, Kakashi explained, showing the 3 silver bells. If you don't, I'll send you back to the academy. He drawled lazily. But sensei, there are only 2 bells, Sakura dumbly stated. Yes, well, this exam does have a high rate of failure, their sensei explained. Well, the timer is set for noon, so you've got about 3 hours to get a bell. Begin. With that, the 3 Genin hopefuls disappeared into the surrounding forest. Well, Naruto and Sasuke are well hidden. They might actually be able to pass this time, if they can get Sakura to work with them, Kakashi thought, while taking note of the surroundings. All 3 Genin were hidden well, although he could still see them, but then again, he wasn't a jounin for nothing. Meanwhile, Sakura was watching Kakashi impatiently. She was sure that Naruto would jump the gun and attack their sensei first, but it seemed like he had more sense than she gave him credit for. I must try and find Sasuke-kun, and then we can come up with a plan to get those bells, she thought as she searched the area for her crush. However, she couldn't find him or Naruto. She quietly moved around the shrubs and bushes trying to find the Uchiha heir, but she failed. As time began to tick away, she became more and more worried. If she didn't get a bell soon, she would never be on the same team as her beloved Sasuke-kun. As she was searching, Kakashi found himself occupied with a 2-sided attack from the boys. Naruto attacked from the left and Sasuke the right. The boys targeted his feet, which the Jounin easily dodged by jumping in the air, only to meet a pair of kunai thrown from the boys on his way up. He was taken by their thoroughness. The kunai didn't leave him room to dodge them, and so he quickly blocked them. Before he could be too proud of himself, he was knocked back towards Earth by the boys, this time from above. One set must be clones of some sort, Kakashi concluded. But damn, that stung. He was met once again by two fists, courtesy of Naruto and Sasuke, his own weight increasing the force of the blow. However, his body was quickly replaced by a section of log. Shit, Kawarimi. Replacement technique, the boys thought, before scattering back into the woods to hide. Meanwhile, Kakashi was nursing an aching back and thanking his lucky stars that the boys were slower coming up than going down. If the attack had been coordinated and struck at the same time, they might have very well gotten the bells. Sakura saw the display of taijutsu from the tag team with mouth agape and eyes wide. Who knew that Naruto and Sasuke could fight so well together? This time she was able to keep her eyes trained on the boys, and she quickly made her way towards the two before she was interrupted. Yo! Kakashi's voice traveled to her ears from behind and slightly above her, and she quickly whirled around, kunai in her hand in a defensive stance. But when her eyes caught up to her body, she didn't find her teacher. In fact, she didn't find anything. What she did find was a big black emptiness that engulfed her. Suddenly, out of the darkness, a weak voice emerged, calling for her assistance. Sakura, why you need to Kakashi-ichi? Sasuke's broken voice was quickly followed up by his equally broken body, kunai puncturing his arms like a pin cushion, and he was showing signs of obvious blood loss. Upon seeing her crush's deformed features, Sakura proceeded to promptly faint at the jinjutsu she had been ensnared in. Kakashi was watching the kunoichi and sweat dropped at her inability to recognize the obvious mental attack. Okay, maybe Megan, Narakumi no Jutsu, demonic illusion, hell viewing technique, was a little much. Kakashi thought. Nah, it isn't a high-level jinjutsu or anything. She should have been able to detect it. The report said she'd make a great jinjutsu specialist, like Kurenai. Now there's a thought. How come she wasn't put with her? Kakashi was unable to think too long. He still had two Jinnin to humiliate, or test, however he felt like seeing it. Much to his dismay, however, the two siblings were very difficult to find, causing the Jounin to consider using his dogs once or twice. But such tricks shouldn't be wasted on Jinnin, and he decided to follow the sparse clues they left about for him. Twice he thought he had cornered the duo, only to find them to be shadow clones using Hinge or Mizu Bunshin. These two would be very interesting to teach, the gray-haired man mused. Eventually, he was able to find them. His excellent tracking abilities and above-average speed helped him locate the boys. They were in a clearing, taking stock of their kunai and other gear. They had shown great skill at trap setting and recognition. They had picked through the double-layered traps he had laid with ease, and it was unlikely that they would encounter more than 2 layers of traps. Before he could even greet them, he was forced to dodge a set of kunai courtesy of Naruto and a swift taijutsu attack from Sasuke. Kakashi was able to block the right jab from the Uchiha and the ensuing left roundhouse kick. He even managed to grab the boy's left hand as it flew towards his face, but it was during this period of fighting that Naruto snuck up from behind to grab the bells. With both of his hands occupied grappling with Sasuke, Kakashi couldn't use any techniques to stop the younger boy. But he was an elite ninja after all, and he had the perfect solution to this problem. He tripped the attacking boy. Yep, Mr. I'll be the next Hokage was tripped and thus missed his chance to grab the silver bells that were so critical to their success. Quickly, Kakashi threw Sasuke into his brother, giving him the space to perform a quick counterattack. As the boys picked themselves up from the ground, they noticed the glaring absence of their sensei. However, they remembered a pearl of wisdom their mother had implanted with them. If you can't see your enemy, go to a place where you have a good defensive and observational position. The two scattered into the tree branches, just as Kakashi exploded from the ground. The two quickly flashed through the hand seals for Katon, Housenka no Jutsu, fire type, mythical phoenix flower, and peppered the surrounding area with the miniature fireballs. Kakashi was forced to dodge them, and in doing so, moved him back towards a thick grove of trees. These two will be interesting. Now if they could just figure out the true purpose of this test. The Jounin mused to himself, dodging the joint attack from the boys once more. Sasuke quickly flashed through the seals for Housenka no Jutsu once more, forcing the Jounin to dodge to his right and confront Naruto, who flashed through the seals for Katan. Gakakyu no Jutsu, Fire type, Grand Fireball, and inhaled deeply before launching a large ball of flame from his mouth. As the fire settled down, the duo was able to make out the form of a tree section, once more the victim of a Kawarimi no Jutsu, courtesy of the masked Jounin. Said Jounin was currently cursing the two for actually making him work so hard to put them down. Their tandem style of attacking was very good, and both boys were better fighters than either of their profiles had indicated. Sasuke had much more chakra than his profile stated, and a greater level of control as well. Naruto was simply faster and stronger than indicated. Together the two made an excellent team, and in the coming years would prove to be invaluable to the Leaf. As he was mulling this over in his mind, he heard the ring of the timer, indicating that the three had run out of time. Well, I guess that it's Sakura I'll be tying to the tree this time. Kakashi stated more to himself than to the boys who were stewing over their inability to retrieve the bells. Sakura opened her eyes and found herself staring at her sensei. While actually she was staring at his legs, and when she tried to stand up, she found herself tied to a large wooden stump. To her right were the boys who still seemed angry that they hadn't retrieved the bells. Well, that was informative. The voice of her tardy sensei drifted towards her ears. Sakura, your profile stated that you were excellent at recognizing Genjutsu, but you fell for a fairly simple one. If you can't focus under pressure, then you will not survive your first battle between ninja, Sasuke and Naruto. Your planning was excellent. Your execution was nearly flawless, and you both showed great potential, but you lost track of time, which is one of the more important things a shinobi must keep track of, especially in the field. Although you all failed, Naruto and Sasuke showed that the records of this village are a bit outdated, so I will give you another chance. But it will be much harder than before. He tossed 2 bentos towards the boys. You two can eat, but don't give any to Sakura. Be ready to come at me with the intent to kill me after lunch. With that he poofed away in a cloud of white smoke, leaving the threesome alone. The boys began to eat their lunches, but stopped about halfway through. Sakura was inwardly fuming over the fact that it was her own uselessness that nearly cost them their opportunity to become genin. Her stomach was growling, already having digested her light breakfast, and wishing that she could eat the food the boys had left over. It came as a great surprise to her when the 2 boys offered their remaining food to the pink-haired girl. Here, eat up, Sasuke directed. But, Kakashi-sensei told you guys not to give me any food, she dumbly stated. Yeah, but he isn't here right now, and besides, we're pretty sure the idea of the test is to exhibit teamwork. I mean, why else would teams be made of 3 people? He can't send one of us back to the academy. It's either all or nothing, Naruto explained, filling her in on the conversation he and Sasuke had earlier as Sasuke cut through the ropes tying her to the stump. Sakura quickly rubbed the feeling back into her wrists and was about to take the first bite of food when Kakashi reappeared in another cloud of smoke. You pass, his voice changing from unbridled fury to a complimentary tone in mere seconds. He was greeted by 2 smirks and a look of surprise from his students. Naruto and Sasuke were right. You are in a 3-man team for a reason. I can't fail just 1 or 2 of you. It's all or nothing. Sasuke and Naruto showed that they could work together very well. But to be a team, the 3 of you must be willing to cooperate and work as a team. Do you see that monument over there? That is the monument for fallen heroes. They have all died in the name of this village. Some of them should be here right now, walking around, but they aren't because they either couldn't or didn't work as a team. Remember, the 3 of you are a team, but you are more than just 3 names on a piece of paper in some filing cabinet. To become a complete team, you must trust each other to do what you alone cannot. From this point forth, you are Team 7, but you must become comrades and friends if you truly wish to become a team. Remember, in this world of shinobi, those who break the rules are considered trash. None of the other teams I have instructed shared their food with the other member. They were foolish enough to listen to my instructions, but those who would abandon their friends, they are worse than trash. The 3 genin sat, Listening to Kakashi's explanation, they were all thinking the same thing. It seems like he knows this from personal experience. Come to think of it, he probably does. Well, anyway, meet me at the Hokage Tower tomorrow for your first mission. With that, Kakashi poofed away in a cloud of smoke to the chorus of curses coming from the two boys. That night there was a celebration in the Mitarashi household. Anko took the boys out to dinner for their accomplishments. She told the boys that no one had ever passed Kakashi's test before, so she was really proud of them. She bought each of her sons a new set of kunai, as well as an imitation of her own trademark trench coat. Sasuke's was a dark blue that almost seemed black and had the Uchiha crest on the back. It had many hidden pockets for carrying weapons as well as other supplies. Naruto's was a dark gray and the only markings on it was the hybrid Uchiha fan and Uzumaki swirl design he had created. It was proudly worn on the collar of his coat. It was a great surprise when the Sandaime also gave them some gifts. Sasuke received a very old manual from the Hokage that was supposedly from his ancestors. It was all about how to manipulate fire for different techniques and is thought to have led to the creation of many of the newer fire jutsu. Naruto received different books and scrolls that taught the basics of sealing. The Sandaime explained that while the Yondaime didn't have a bloodline limit in the traditional sense, he did create many different seals that could only be used by people of his blood. Sarutobi had learned, in his many dealings with Naruto, that if any information was written down, the boy would pick it up very quickly. It was when information was simply shown to him, or during oral examinations that the boy struggled. In truth, Sarutobi knew the two types of clone he had mentioned to the boy, but he couldn't teach them to Naruto. He knew that sooner or later, the boys would probably copy the Mizu Bunshin from Kakashi, or an opponent. As for the Tsuchi Bunshin, Sarutobi himself had learned the technique as a gift when he first became Hokage, with the understanding that he never write it down or teach it to anyone. He wasn't going to break the trust of the elderly Tsuchikage over a matter as trivial as a technique. As he watched the family finish dinner and joke around, he couldn't help but be proud. The will of fire was clearly evident in this young generation, and it shone on a bright future for Konoha. Anko was exceptionally proud of her sons. However, she also was a bit weary for them. Naruto had never been outside of the village, both for his own safety. There was talk of an organization which was interested in the demon vessels, and because of what he might possibly represent to the village. A weapon of great power. She shuddered every time she thought of her son that way. She had heard rumors of another vessel from the Wind Country who had a taste for blood and was about her son's age. She only hoped that they didn't come to the next Chunin exam, or there might be a fight of catastrophic size. Sasuke hadn't been outside the village since the massacre. Since he represented the last of a bloodline, his survival was key to the village. Letting him go away would be a golden opportunity for assassins from other villages. When they left the village on a mission, she didn't know how they would react. Naruto would probably like it, a chance to see something new, learn new techniques, or just meet new people. Sasuke, she didn't know how he would take it. In the almost 3 years since he had been living with her, he had changed remarkably. He was lively and energetic. He was obsessive with his training, but Naruto was able to reach him, and she was glad. If he had turned into an Avenger, she didn't know what she would have done. Probably beat him into a pulp. She mused to herself. It was then that she decided to be a part of her son's first mission outside of the village. That way, they would have a familiar face if something were to go wrong. What am I thinking? She mentally berated herself. They have to do a bunch of crappy D-rank missions first. I wonder who will take it the worst. Naruto? Or Sasuke? She couldn't help but smile and snicker at the mental images of her sons' faces when they found out that their first 20 or so missions would probably involve weeding some lazy civilian's garden. 2 weeks have passed since Team 7 passed their test, and the members were well entrenched into the shinobi life by now. They were used to getting up early, only to remember that Kakashi was always 2 hours late. They were used to training, which consisted mainly of physical exercises and light sparring. But they weren't used to the crappy D-rank missions they were receiving. While Sasuke kept up an emotionless facade, he was inwardly steaming, swearing on the graves of his deceased parents that if he had to weed one more garden, he was going to find a way to resurrect the dead members of the clan and then kill them himself. Naruto was angry as well. He was pissed that he was doing grunt work when he could be off chasing bandits or doing something productive, like training or eating ramen, anything to stop the monotony. Sakura was getting bored doing the same tedious jobs over and over, but she was also glad that these short missions gave the team ample time to train, something she realized she needed to do much more of. She was currently waiting for her three other teammates at their regular meeting place, a small bridge that spanned a small river and was roughly halfway between the three Jinin's houses. She was adamant about punctuality and continued to show up before her teammates, although now it was only about 10 minutes before the others now. She was currently researching different ways to increase her power. Given that she had excellent chakra control, albeit a small amount, she found two different fields that were perfect for her: medicine and Jinjutsu. She was trying to figure out which area to concentrate on, but was having a hard time deciding. The 2 weeks had shown a marked increase in the trio's teamwork. She learned a lot about her teammates and was rethinking her previous notions about them, especially Naruto. Before, she would have written the multicolored-haired boy off as a general idiot and fool that had only just squeaked by the academy. But now, he had proven himself to be intelligent, physically strong, and cheerful, despite these strange looks he often received. Sakura had heard rumors about her teammate, but she didn't know what to think of them. From what she had pieced together, she would never just go up and ask him. He had been separated from his mother after the Kyuubi attack and not rejoined with her until he was 7. His mother was a jounin and was the former apprentice of the traitor Sannin, Orochimaru. Due to her connections with the powerful ninja, she was often disrespected and sometimes hated. For whatever reason, Sasuke had moved in with the two and had been living with them since his family died. But just because the people don't like his mom, do they really hate him? She thought. When she told her sensei that the things she disliked were Ino and Naruto, she was basing those on what she had seen. Many of the civilians of the village often shot glares at the boy and muttered curses behind his back. When she asked her parents why, the answer she was looking for was skirted, and if her parents were in a good mood, they would simply tell her she wouldn't understand and that she should probably keep her distance from him. Yet all of the new data, she had told her that Naruto was trustworthy and protective of his teammates and would never hurt anyone that didn't deserve it. He was a mystery, and she would figure him out sooner or later. As Sakura was contemplating Naruto's life, the rest of her team was making their way towards the bridge for their next mission. She absent-mindedly greeted the boys as they arrived only minutes before Kakashi showed up, and they made their way towards the Hokage Tower for their assignment. Damn them. Damn them to hell. Sakura was fuming as she waited for her tardy sensei. Somehow, the boys had managed to talk the Hokage into giving them a C-rank mission instead of the boring and safe D-rank ones they normally got. She was beside herself. She didn't want to look weak in front of Sasuke, but she doubted her ability to perform up to par on the harder mission. Hence the cursing of her teammates, them, and that annoyingly late sensei. I mean, would it kill him to be on time once? Apparently it would, because he was running an astounding 2.5 hours late. If he didn't have the client with them, then the three would have left a long time ago, with or without Kakashi. The threat potential on sea-level missions was mostly bandits, and those were rare. Yo, sorry we're late. There was this drowning fish, and it needed to be given CPR, and someone glued my mask to my face, so I had to instruct Tazuna-san here how to do it. Kakashi greeted the trio with a smile, or at least what they had come to interpret as a smile, and a wave of his head. Tazuna was simply staring at the man in disbelief. He was buying supplies, and he tells them I was giving CPR to a fish? Tazuna thought as Sakura yelled, "Liar," at the jounin. The group was walking along the road between Konoha and the Wave Country, and it was very boring. The only interesting thing was a quick lesson about the different shinobi nations and their leaders. Besides the Hokage, when this was mentioned, Naruto supplied that he would be the greatest Hokage of all time one day. There was the Raikage, Kazekage, Mizukage, and Tsuchikage, who were the leaders of the Cloud Village, Sand Village, Mist Village, and Stone Village, respectfully. When he was done talking the team, and their charge drifted back into a lull of inactivity. Naruto, who was in the front, was searching for signs of bandit attacks or ambushes. Sasuke, who was behind him, was mostly sightseeing and enjoying his time out of the village. Tazuna was worried that he was sending these three kids to their death if they were to encounter the true reason he needed escorting, and Sakura returned to pondering over her teammates. They became so entrenched in their various activities that when an inconspicuous puddle came into view, no one immediately realized that something was wrong. Kakashi was the first to notice that a rather large puddle had formed in the road when there hadn't been any rain for days. Naruto probably would have overlooked it if he hadn't been bored and activated his Sharingan. It was a habit he had developed, although he wasn't sure why, but if he got bored, he would activate the Sharingan and try to copy new jutsu, or just the way people acted and walked. On this occasion, he saw the chakra flowing from the deposit of water and silently signaled Sasuke that there were enemies about. Sasuke, in turn, turned towards Kakashi, catching the attention of Sakura, but the Jounin didn't seem to be paying attention, but Sasuke noticed his eyes were harder than normal. He must have noticed them, he reasoned, and turned his attention to the front, where Naruto was deciding what to do. This is a C rank. There shouldn't be any chance of shinobi encounters. Naruto reasoned to himself. But if I attack them and they aren't after Tazuna-san, then I could start something I can't get out of. He gulped at the thought of possibly attacking another Jounin. He settled for a simple strategy. He passed through the puddle and watching the reaction of the liquid, trotting in it purposely. Sasuke followed suit, but Sakura and Tazuna walked around it, while Kakashi just ignored it. As he passed, the puddle quickly changed shape into two men, whose faces were covered with horned masks bearing the symbol of the hidden mist village. They had metal gauntlets on their arms, connected by a serrated metal chain, which was covered with a deadly poison. The masked duo quickly ran forward and wrapped their chain around Kakashi, and before anyone could do much more than look surprised, they pulled the sharp chain through the Jounin, separating his body into many different sections. One down. Their voices were given a deeper timbre by the masks they wore, and they were good tag team fighters. They quickly moved towards Tazuna and Sakura. Sakura was frozen, seeing her sensei ripped apart by the two masked ninja in front of her, and it wasn't until the forms of Naruto and Sasuke leapt in front of her and their client that she realized how close the two attackers were. Naruto completed the seals for Katon Housenka no Jutsu, forcing the pair to either jump up, due to the area covered by the small fireballs, or disengage the chain and dodge separately. The pair jumped up into the air, just as Naruto intended for them, only to be greeted by a much larger fireball, courtesy of Sasuke. The ball of intense flame connected with the pair, although they were able to lessen much of the damage by disconnecting the chain and twisting to the side. It was during the masked men's dodge that Naruto leapt into the air and threw a pair of kunai attached with wire at the pair, successfully capturing one ninja, the kunai acting as weights like a bola and then embedding themselves into a tree, with just the slightest help from the boy's bloodline. Meanwhile, Sasuke was engaged with the other ninja in a taijutsu match. He was easily dodging the slowed blows, thanks to a combination of Sharingan and the fact that the armor of his foe was slowing him down. The masked ninja launched a clawed palm at the Uchiha's face, only for the boy to duck under the blow and land a straight jab into the attacking shinobi's stomach, doubling him over. Before the mist ninja could even blink, Sasuke's knee connected with his face, sending his head reeling backwards, once more exposing his stomach. His clawed hands flew to his face to staunch the blood flowing from his nose. Only then did the mist ninja remember the poison on his oversized clawed gloves. Upon impact with his face, the poison on his claws mixed with the blood that was trickling into his mouth through the crack in his mask caused by the boy he was fighting. At first he staggered backwards, probably from the force of Sasuke's knee, but he quickly dropped to his knees before falling on his stomach, dead. Seeing his brother's death, the second ninja tried to cut himself with his own gauntlet, only for it to be forcibly held to his side by an unseen force. Now, we need someone to question. Naruto grinned at the captured foe. Excellent work, you two. Kakashi's lazy voice greeted the ninjas and their charge. Sensei, but how Yu-Chain died? Sakura's gaping mouth was able to form that disconnected sentence after the initial shock of her sensei's return wore off. She glanced at the pieces of his body. A twig was sticking out of his midsection. Wait, a twig? He had used Kawarimi before the deadly duo had cut him with the chain and substituted himself with a section of tree. Kakashi turned to face the captured man and asked who their target was. The masked ninja didn't reply. He reached up and lifted his forehead protector, but from the position of the genin, they couldn't see what he was doing. After a moment, the incapacitated ninja's eyes widened in horror, and he began to scream and yell. The bridge maker. Over and over until he passed out. Lowering his headband, Kakashi turned and leveled his gaze at Tazuna. It would seem, he started, that Tazuna-san needs to explain a few things before we continue. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Sakura was more than angry with her luck today. First of all, she was sent on a mission she probably wasn't ready for, and now she was on a mission she definitely wasn't ready for. Damn that drunken man. As she cussed out Tazuna, she wondered who she was more pissed off at. Tazuna, the man who had lied about the mission specs, or Gato, the man who was harassing the people of the Wave Village. The other thought floating around in her mind was her sensei. What was hidden under his protector that it would cause an assassin to cry out in horror? Maybe he lost his eye, and he showed him the empty socket. She thought, shuddering at the thought. After Tazuna explained that he was trying to bring relief to the oppressed village by means of the new bridge he was building, much of the mystery surrounding the attack of the Nuke Nin was resolved. The Wave Country/village was a once thriving place, until Gato, a ruthless businessman, had set his sights on it. He had entered and wrecked the economy of the town through blockades and violence. If the bridge was completed, it would be a gateway for new supplies and goods to enter the town. After some discussion, and more than a little crying from Tazuna, the team decided it would continue the mission. If the bridge was completed, then not only would the economy of the village return, but trade between the Konoha and the hopefully reinvigorated sea town would blossom. They would request assistance when they reached the relative safety of the town. Kakashi explained that the mission was at least B rank now, and if they encountered a Jounin ninja, it would escalate again to A rank. The group was making good time after the ambush and had an uneventful trip across the waters surrounding the Wave Country. After they made landfall, they headed towards Tazuna's house so they could send for help. About midway between the house and their landing spot, Naruto, who was leading the group still, suddenly threw a kunai at a bush to his left. Sasuke quickly followed suit, adding a Gakkaku no Jutsu to scorch the area in case Naruto hit anything. As the foliage began to burn down a bit, they discovered a rather terrified snowshoe hare, hugging against the farthest tree for his life. Kakashi quickly doused the fire with a small Suiton Jutsu. However, he pondered about the appearance of the hare. That's a snow hare, but it hasn't molted yet. It's the middle of summer. It should have turned brown by now. Unless it was raised to be used in a replacement. It seems that tougher competition has arrived. He was sure to keep his visible eye open for any signs of their enemy. It was a good thing, too, because not 5 minutes after his genins almost barbecued an innocent hare, a giant sword came flying at the team from behind. Everyone, get down now, he ordered, throwing himself at the ground as Sasuke and Sakura managed to bring down their ward, and Naruto flattened himself out as well. The sword embedded itself into the trunk of a large tree, and when the group raised their heads to look at the weapon, they found a fairly tall man with spiky brown hair. His forehead protector was askew to his left, and his mouth was covered in bandages. He wore no shirt, but his forearms were covered in camouflaged warmers, and he stood on his sword with an air of confidence. The copy ninja, Hatake Kakashi. No wonder the demon brothers failed to kill the bridge builder. His voice was deep and ominous, sending chills down the backs of Tazuna and Sakura. Naruto and Sasuke were affected a bit, but it was less intense due to their mother's training. Momochi Zabuza, Nuke Nin of Kirigakure. As you can see, I too read the bingo book. Kakashi replied. His voice didn't carry any of his usual laziness. He once more reached up and lifted the barrier obscuring his left eye. Oh, the Sharingan, I get to see it already. How interesting. Zabuza leapt off his large head cleaver and onto the surface of the water, taking the large sword with him in one movement. He raised his right hand up to his face and raised the index and middle fingers, while his left arm stood straight up, the fingers mimicking those of his other hand. A thick fog suddenly rolled through the area, obscuring the woods and its occupants. The chakra being released by the two Jounins was something to be in awe of. Sakura, who was much more aware of chakra signatures than the boys, was having a hard time refraining from screaming in terror. The killing intent of the enemy Jounin was focused at the genin and their instructor. Don't worry, Sakura. I won't let any of my teammates die. Kakashi turned towards the team, his eyes closed and a smile played on his lips. Running vertical along the center of his left eye was a long since healed scar. This led to another train of thought for the pink-haired girl. I thought the Sharingan was the bloodline of the Uchiha clan. But then how does Kakashi-sensei have it? Is he related to Sasuke-kun maybe? Suddenly, Zabuza appeared in the center of the defensive perimeter the team had set up around Tazuna, sword stretched across his back, ready to slay the three genin. But almost as soon as he appeared, Kakashi was there, planting a kunai into the side of the enemy, only for the body to turn to water and fall to the ground in a pool of liquid. Mizu Bunshin, he thought as he quickly searched for the missing nin. However, Zabuza got the upper hand and appeared behind the leaf jounin. His sword swung at Kakashi's waist and ripped him apart, only for the gray-haired man to turn into water as well. Zabuza's eyes opened in astonishment. He copied my technique in this fog. The Sharingan truly is a weapon to be feared. As he finished thinking, Zabuza felt the unmistakable edge of a kunai pressed against his neck. It's over, Kakashi said coldly. Are you sure about that? Suddenly, Zabuza dissolved into water once more, the product of a Mizu Bunshin. This time it was Kakashi's eyes that widened. He suddenly found himself flying towards the river a few meters away from the group. He didn't notice the impact of Zabuza's leg, but it was strong enough to send him into the water. Zabuza rushed towards the river before stopping suddenly. Makabishi, good try, but not good enough, Kakashi. He quickly backflipped onto the river's surface once more. Kakashi's head broke the surface of the lake, trying to find his adversary, only to realize that it was far too late. Zabuza stood at his side, forming hand seals very quickly. Suru no Jutsu. Water type. Water prison technique. He spoke the jutsu with practiced ease, and the surrounding water quickly engulfed Kakashi into a swirling sphere of water. Zabuza's right arm was sticking into the sphere, holding it together and increasing the density of the water to trap the illustrious copy ninja. Run. He can't follow you while he keeps this jutsu up, Kakashi pleaded with his team. Naruto let out a short laugh. Nope, not gonna happen, sensei. Those that would abandon their comrades are worse than trash, right? He gave his brother a quick look and the two rushed the mist jounin, only to stop at the water's edge when Zabuza created a Mizu Bunshin without using hand seals. The two boys attacked the clone, but were thrown back by the flat of the giant sword their attacker wielded. Searching the surrounding area for anything that could be used to fight off the clone, something on the ground caught Sasuke's eye. Hey, Naruto. He gestured towards the ground off to the side of the clone that was steadily making its way towards the boys. Naruto looked towards his teammate was indicating and got the meaning of the unspoken sentence. Well, shit, I didn't want to do it, but you got a point. The blondish boy spoke, before raising his arm and pointing it to the left of the clone, his eyes closed in concentration. Meanwhile, Sasuke was throwing shuriken and kunai at the clone, only for them to be blocked by the giant sword. Thinking quickly, he created a Mizu Bunshin from the river and used it to catch the clone in a pincer move, but the Jounin's clone was much too strong and destroyed the clone before once more kicking the Uchiha away. Those students of yours are weak, Zabuza commented, offhandedly to Kakashi. The Konoha Jounin didn't respond, but watched his students fight against a superior opponent. He watched as Sasuke was once more repelled and fell to the ground. But as he rose, both of the Jounin noticed that his face wasn't contorted in pain or frustration, but plastered with a smirk of superiority. Naruto now, Sasuke yelled. Naruto simply smirked, eerily reminiscent of his brother, and waved his arm. In a fraction of a second, the Mizu Bunshin disintegrated and Zabuza was hit with an unseen force, and the shock of the attack forced him to release the water prison. What was that? Sakura wondered in awe. Zabuza's right arm began to drip blood as he brought it to his face to inspect the damage. He found the small makabishi lodged in his arm and stomach. The spiked pieces of metal, normally used to impede enemies' movements, had become a rather effective ranged weapon. How the hell did that brat do that? He cursed mentally, drawing his sword and advancing towards the duo, until he was stopped by Kakashi's figure rising from the river in front of him. Your fight is with me, he calmly stated, locking eyes with Zabuza. Damn it, this guy is pissing me off. Zabuza commented to himself as he began the hand seals for the Swait Unsuden no Jutsu, water type, water dragon technique. As he flashed through the seals, he noticed something peculiar in the behavior of his opponent. He was doing the exact same seals at the exact same time. Suetun Suryuden. Both Jounins cried out at the same time. Two dragons composed of water rose from the raging river and spiraled at their intended target, only to crash into each other. Damn it, it's like he knows. Zabuza started. What I'm going to do next? Kakashi finished. Zabuza's eyes widened in shock as the copy Nin read his thoughts. Damn you, Zabuza cursed. Insignificant monkey. Kakashi once more supplied the demon of the mist with the end of his sentence. This time Zabuza didn't respond and just ran through the seals for Sueton Daibikafu no Jutsu. Water type, great waterfall technique. Kakashi once more imitated his opponent, and when Zabuza locked eyes with his opponent once more, he was startled to find not only Kakashi, but the ghostly figure of himself, standing behind him. Zabuza slowed his seals just a fraction of a second, but it was enough for Kakashi to finish. The water on which the two were standing began to churn around the two and rise up, creating a tidal wave that crashed against the rooted body of Momochi Zabuza. Zabuza felt his body slam into the trunk of a tree before he was pinned to the trunk with kunai. How is it that you can see the future? He asked groggily. Your future is death. Kakashi began to move forward, kunai in hand, but was stopped as two metallic needles slammed into the incapacitated Jounin's neck, killing him instantly. Everyone in the small clearing created by the battle followed the path of the needles to a masked figure standing on the tree. Thanks, I've been looking to kill Zabuza for quite some time. You were right, his future was death. The person spoke in a voice that sounded like he was the age of the genin, maybe a year or two older, but there was no appreciable difference. A mist hunter Nin, Kakashi said and lowered his headband, covering the Sharingan once more. The hunter Nin disappeared in a swirl of leaves, before reappearing next to the body of Zabuza. After a quick series of hand seals, the two disappeared, leaving only Teams 7 and Tazuna. Well, this sucks, Kakashi said, before crumpling to the ground and passing out. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura cried out and ran to the side of her teacher to check on him. He appeared to be fine, but he seemed tired somehow. Come on, let's take him to my house. It's just a ways to town from here. Tazuna offered, still in awe at how the team handled themselves. Kakashi slowly regained consciousness, and with it, all of the aches and pains that come with chakra exhaustion. I wonder how long I was out for this time. The lazy Jounin asked to no one. He opened his one visible eye and found himself laying on a futon in a room he didn't recognize. Shortly afterwards, the door opened to reveal his team in varying states of exhaustion. Only a day and a half, actually, came the reply to his seemingly rhetorical question from the last remaining Uchiha. Were you training? He asked the genin. Just a little bit, sensei, Naruto replied. Mostly just some taijutsu. Kakashi nodded in approval and attempted to sit up a bit, succeeding after 2 tries. It is imperative that we send for help, he said, his voice in a dead serious tone. Zabuza is alive. The standard procedure for Hunter Nin is to dispose of the body on site, not to take it somewhere else. I think that the hunter was working with Zabuza and simply put him in a death-like state. He is still alive and has at least one person working with him. If his partner is skilled enough in the medical arts, which I think they must be because the knowledge needed to put someone in a death-like state is well above average, then we have about 2 weeks or so until Zabuza is well enough to attack again. This brought a gasp from the genin who thought the ex-mist ninja was out of the picture. Sasuke or Naruto, do either of you have a summoning scroll for a messenger bird? Kakashi asked. Both boys nodded their heads in the affirmative and produced 2 identical scrolls. Good. I need one of you to send a message to the Hokage, requesting backup. Right now, the 3 of you aren't strong enough to fight either of the 2 foes we have identified right now. But I plan on changing that. His last sentence was accompanied by a slight smirk, barely evident through the fabric of his mask. While the boys saw this as a good thing, Sakura didn't like the look her sensei had. Not one bit. The next day dawned early and with not a single cloud in the sky, although the genin didn't have the time to admire the surrounding wilderness. Kakashi had taken the team to a location in the forest surrounding Tezuna's house. There were trees every direction one could look, and a stream about 4 feet deep ran through the forest, bisecting the trees into 2 distinctive areas. Now, I'm going to teach the 3 of you to control your chakra. This will help you conserve chakra when it comes to battles you may fight later on. Theoretically, if you master even basic chakra control, you can perform any technique. Of course, that is theoretically and based also on the size of your chakra reserves, but don't worry too much about it. Now, Naruto, and I assume Sasuke have already completed the exercise I'm going to give you, Sakura, so they'll have to do something else. All right, Sakura, you will be climbing trees. The pink-haired girl's face contorted into a look of confusion before she asked how that was going to help her chakra control. Well, you see, you won't be using your hands, Kakashi replied, and proceeded to walk straight up the closest tree, crutches and all, without his hands. It is said that the soles of the feet are the hardest part of the body to gather chakra to, so this will help with proper molding. But also, if you use too much or too little chakra, you won't stick to the 3, so it will also help with your precise control over the amount you use. Sakura pondered over her strategy to conquer this stage obstacle before she pulled her hands into the ram seal and gathered chakra to her feet. If you feel uneasy about this, you might consider running at the tree, her sensei suggested. Sakura ran at the tree at top speed and was able to run more than 3/4 of the way up before she fell back to earth and landing on her feet after a graceful backflip. Very impressive, Sakura. You didn't make the top because of poor control, but because your reserves are so small. Kakashi explained to the 3 genin. I want you to continue to run up and down the trees whenever you can. This way, your reserves will increase significantly. Sakura nodded and continued with her exercise. Meanwhile, Kakashi turned his attention to his 2 remaining students. The exercise you 2 will be doing is called water walking, and it sounds exactly like what it is. He walked out on top of the water and stood on the surface. Suddenly, he wobbled a bit and quickly returned to shore. As you could probably tell, this requires much more chakra to perform. During the tree climbing exercise, the goal was to release a constant amount of chakra to stick to the tree. With this exercise, the goal is to release the correct amount of chakra and then keep control of it away from your body. You see, the chakra you release in this exercise isn't going to be trapped by the tree, so you have to create stilts with your chakra and push them to the bottom of the water. The stream of chakra must be constant and controlled. If we were in Konoha, we would practice over a hot spring, but since we're here, this river will have to do. When the copy ninja had finished the directions, the 2 boys began to test out the new skill. It was slow going, especially for Naruto, since he had so much excess chakra. Sasuke was able to steady himself on the surface by noon, but Naruto was struggling. His feet were battling the water, surfacing, and then submerging once more. They took a break at noon and reunited with Sakura, who was very tired by now and could use the rest. After lunch, they returned to their assigned tasks and continued to struggle. Sakura had made it to the top of a 30-foot-tall tree a few times, but when she tried other trees, she seemed to top out at around 35 feet or so. She assumed it had to do with her small chakra reserves. The boys were a different story altogether. After his initial success with water walking, Sasuke was having a small amount of difficulty. He was able to stand on top of the water fine, but if he tried moving more than small baby steps, he would lose control and wet his feet with cold river water. Since he wasn't the chakra monster his brother was, he took a break around 2 in the afternoon and continued reading the information the Hokage had passed on to him. The actual manuscript was too valuable to bring with him, but he had taken many notes on the information contained within and brought those. The steps outlined to control fire weren't exceedingly complex, but required a good amount of control to do. Naruto was still having troubles with the exercise, but he was now able to stand on the water, but any attempt at movement would throw off his control. But he kept at it, and while Sasuke was practicing some fire control skills, Naruto was finally able to move a bit, albeit unconventionally. Having troubles keeping his chakra at a consistent level away from his body, he simply used his chakra to skate along the surface of the water. It was effective, but it wasn't the point of the exercise. When Kakashi returned later, he noticed the improvement his students had made. Sakura had improved her reserves somewhat. It wouldn't be an instantaneous process, but he was quite happy with her improvement. The boys, while Sasuke had been able to stand on the surface easily, and then take a few steps, but after 2 or 3 his control or reserves faltered and he would fall in. Nothing another day or 2 of practice wouldn't fix. Kakashi thought to himself. Naruto, on the other hand, was making slight progress. He could stand on the water, but taking any steps larger than an inch or 2 was impossible. He did show of his new skating ability, and while it impressed Kakashi and Sakura, reluctantly, Kakashi was quick to point out that it wasn't the goal of the exercise to skate, but to walk. The team began to head back to Tezuna's house for dinner in a comfortable silence. The genin were either too tired or annoyed to speak much. Oh, yeah, before I forget, the backup I requested will be here tomorrow, so I'd make use of the day training, since you might not get too much more time. Kakashi said, still reading that perverted orange book of his. The next day was typical of the wave country, sunny with morning dew rising off the grass and a light fog rolling in off the surrounding water. The genin spent the first half of their day continuing with their chakra control exercises from yesterday. After lunch, Sakura had tentatively tried the water walking exercise and decided that she needed to expand her reserves much more before trying it. Sasuke had almost gotten the trick of the exercise and was almost able to walk from one shore to the other, although his feet would slip under the surface of the river once and again. Naruto was making progress as well, especially after some tips from his brother, who watched how Naruto was molding his chakra. They were almost even in terms of control, but Naruto was slightly behind Sasuke, if only because of his abnormal amount of chakra. As the group headed towards their home, the boys felt a chakra signature approaching quickly and took up defensive positions around Sakura, who was confused at the sudden behavior of her teammates. Almost as soon as Sakura figured out someone was coming, her teammates were uneasily shifting their weight from one foot to the other and searching their surroundings for any disturbances. Suddenly realization dawned on the boys, and they quickly turned tail and ran towards the house. "Wait, what's going on?" Sakura yelled at her teammates' backs. Nothing. Nothing. Just, don't tell her anything." Naruto yelled and added a burst of speed to distance himself from his teammate. This left one pink-haired kunoichi very confused as she suddenly felt a figure drop from the trees behind her. She whirled around and drew a kunai, only to find her attacker was wearing a Konoha headband along with a trench coat and was staring in the direction that Sasuke and Naruto had run off. Can I help you?" Sakura asked. "They ran off that way, didn't they?" The figure asked in a rhetorical way. "Why, yes." Sakura stammered. She felt the killer intent rolling off this new figure and was very frightened by it. "Thanks," the mysterious figure said with a smile, before disappearing once more, her trench coat flowing behind her. Sakura shrugged her shoulders and continued back towards the house. When she returned to Tezuna's house, she was greeted by her sensei and Tezuna's daughter Tsunami. "Hey sensei, I saw this really strange lady, and she had a Konoha headband. Is she our backup?" Sakura asked as she accepted a glass of water from Tsunami. "Yes, that would be Mitarashi Anko, who I believe right now is yelling at Sasuke and Naruto." Kakashi answered without looking up from his book. He was correct, because if Sakura listened very carefully, she could make out sounds coming from upstairs that sounded like either yelling or murder. It really could have been either one. Suddenly, Naruto and Sasuke ran through the kitchen and out the door, followed by a set of kunai, which embedded themselves in the table. "Get back here. I'm not done with you two yet." Anko yelled from the top of a flight of stairs that lead to the bedrooms. Ka-san, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but no." Naruto yelled back over his shoulder, still running for his life, Sasuke ahead of him. He hadn't stuck around to talk with Anko. So that's Naruto and Sasuke's mom. Sakura thought as she watched the woman at the top of the stairs glare at the retreating backs of her sons. She's scary and deadly. And she's a jounin, so she's strong. I bet Sasuke would love someone who was as strong as his mom. Damn, I need to train more. A week had passed since Anko had arrived, and things eventually settled down. After Anko had trained the boys into the ground, both figuratively and physically, for attacking a jounin and disregarding orders, she became calmer and helped guard Tazuna or train the genin. Sakura watched as the boys grew stronger under the tutelage of two jounins. She was quite disappointed in the fact that she didn't have enough chakra to perform almost all of the jutsu that the boys were learning. She was diligently climbing trees like it was going out of fashion, but her chakra reserves were growing at what seemed like a snail's pace. She was currently lying at the base of a tree resting after another continuous hour of running up and down a 47-foot tree. In almost a week and a half, she hadn't managed to find out how Naruto was able to propel Makabishi at a jounin, or how Sasuke came to live with Anko and Naruto. It wasn't for lack of trying either, they just wouldn't talk. The best she got out of them was, it's called a secret for a reason. In one short week, Sakura had learned to hate that word like nothing else. Not even Ino Pig could compare to her hatred of the word secret. If I hear that once more, I think I'll go insane. She mused to herself and started to get back on her feet. Hey, Pinky. Sakura turned around to see Anko meandering over towards her, leaving Naruto and Sasuke lying on the ground, dazed. You've been doing that forever, aren't you bored yet? The jounin asked. Well, yeah, I mean I keep running up and down, but I just can't seem to increase my reserves enough. Well, that's generally the problem that plagues most kunoichi. We have pretty damn good control, but not large enough reserves. Anko said. This wasn't anything new to Sakura, she had known this before. She looked at Anko and noticed the glint in her eyes that seemed to promise pain. But there are other ways of forcing your reserves to increase. Keep in mind that most of them are illegal and you would be killed, either by the attempt or by Konoha if you did, but there is one perfectly good way that might work for you, but will need Kakashi's help. A few more days passed, with the boys engrossing themselves in the literature that they received from the Hokage, and Sakura working with Anko and Kakashi on. Well, no one knew quite what they were doing. The day wore on, and the two jounin began to return home with a badly winded Sakura, but the boys continued to practice. They returned for dinner, which was a subdued affair, both due to the economic state of the country and the loss of another 5 workers from the bridge, pushing its completion back even further. Then there was the enigma known as Inari. Tsunami's son was silent and would often throw dirty looks at the ninja. That night, things came to a head. Inari was watching the genin eating dinner when he suddenly threw his fist at the table. Why? Why do you even try? You'll never be strong enough to beat Gato. No one is. You'll just end up dead. Don't flatter yourself, kid. I don't plan on dying anytime soon. Naruto replied, barely acknowledging the boy. Idiot. Gato's too strong. He'd just kill you like you were a fly. Inari almost screamed as tears from long since repressed memories welled to the surface. Yeah, whatever. Do you have any more rice? It's really good. Naruto asked Tsunami. You don't get it, do you? Now Inari was screaming, his tears flowing freely down his face. Gato's taken everything from me. You have no idea what it's like. A very tense silence followed, as everyone watched Naruto for a reaction. So you're telling me, you've been playing the protagonist in your own tragedy? That's a stupid way to live, even worse than revenge. Kid, I don't know what happened, but I doubt that it was worse than what I lived through for almost 8 years. I doubt that very much. In this entire world, there are probably only 8 people that have the same kind of pain that I had for so long. If you think that your life is so tough, then do something about it. Don't just sit there and cry. Naruto quickly stomped off into the surrounding forest for some well-deserved alone time. Inari was shocked speechless, while Anko and Sasuke were staring daggers at the boy, radiating killer intent at the boy, who luckily was unawares. It wasn't until Sakura broke the silence that this trend stopped. Shouldn't we try and find Naruto? Zabuza should be healed by tomorrow, and we'll need all of our strength to fight him. No, he needs some time to himself. I think this little argument drug up some rather unpleasant memories for him. Anko replied. Later that night, Kakashi found Inari sitting on a small pier that was by the house. Surprisingly, he also found Sakura there. He figured she would be too tired to be up, what with the training she had been doing. He sat next to Inari, while Sakura was lying on her back looking at the sky. You know, Naruto doesn't want to be mean or anything, but he just doesn't respond well to wallowing and brooding. The lazy Jounin said, but he does know what he was talking about. I heard about your father, and I am truly sad to hear that such a great man was killed by a thug like Gato, but you still have a mother. Naruto grew up on his own for almost 8 years with no parents. He was hated for something he had no control over, even after he found Anko. This was a news flash to the pink-haired Genin. She didn't realize that people hated him just for who his mother was. This called for more contemplation. A lot more contemplation. Naruto stormed into the forest, in the exact same manner he stormed out of Tezuna's house. He was feeling emotional, not quite crying, but not too far from it. It was something he hadn't done since he moved in with his mom, and he didn't plan on starting now. So he did the best thing he knew to take his mind of certain disrespectful child. He trained, and trained, and trained some more. He didn't stop until it was easily midnight, and he still had energy to burn. Yes, but tomorrow is the day Zabuza is supposed to finally be healed, so I need to conserve my energy. He thought, might as well go to sleep. With that, he lay down in the soft grass and fell into a quiet sleep. Morning dawned early, and Haku was making good use of it. The fake hunter Nin was gathering herbs that would be needed after the fight with the copy ninja Hatake Kakashi and his team of genin. Of course, the two boys were the only ones worth preparing for. From what was gleaned during the previous encounter, it was obvious that the two were above-average tandem fighters. And then there was the strange blonde and black-haired boy. He was able to project Makabishi into Zabuza-sama. I wish I could figure that trick out. Haku entered a clearing and noticed the aforementioned boy lying in the grass. Walking towards the prone boy silently, Haku stopped and stared at the sleeping boy's face. Along with the distinctive dual whisker marks, Haku noted the small scars covering the boy's eyelids. Someone tried to remove his eyes? This thought crossed through Haku's mind without being fully thought through. Damn you, kid. Do you have any idea how hard those pieces of metal were to remove? Haku barely noticed the pain of the spines of the thistles cutting skin. As the blood slowly slid down Haku's right hand, it fell into Naruto's snoring mouth. The fake hunter turned and left the sleeping boy. When we fight, I'll make sure you can't endanger my precious person. Not even 30 seconds after Haku left the clearing, Naruto shifted in his sleep, the motion of which caused the dark blonde to bite the inside of his cheek, drawing blood and waking the boy with a yelp. Haku's blood quickly rushed towards the new entrance, and Naruto began the tedious process of absorbing the new DNA. The only thing Naruto felt was a slight rumble in his stomach from a lack of food. He quickly headed back towards the house for some well-deserved food. When Naruto arrived at the house, he found that his team had already left for the bridge. They too were making use of an early sunrise. With any luck, the as-of-yet unnamed bridge would be finished by the end of next week, and this mission would end. As he was about to leave and rejoin his team, two samurai decided to cut through the front door in an attempt to abduct Tsunami. Before they could even make a snide opening remark, their stomachs were crushed by a pair of fists, courtesy of a certain genin. The pair slunk into unconsciousness rather quickly, and Naruto simply cussed. His stomach was twisting and turning, and now he didn't have time for breakfast. If they attacked here, then they must also be at the bridge. I want the two of you to go somewhere safe. He addressed Tsunami and Inari, who was standing at the corner. Gather as many townspeople as you can and prepare yourself. Gato might choose this time to make an example. He quickly ran towards the bridge and arrived just in time to see Sasuke kick the masked hunter Nin away. He quickly rushed over and joined the others. Thankfully, Zabuza and Haku were on the opposite end of the unfinished bridge. I see that the blonde boy has decided to come. Zabuza commented offhandedly. Haku, don't take any chances with those two. Something doesn't sit right with me about them. Hi, Zabuza-sama, came a high-pitched voice from behind the porcelain mask. Naruto couldn't tell whether it was a guy's voice or a girl's. Suddenly, the mist ninja split into two, then four. The masked person kept on dividing so fast, it was making Naruto's head spin and his stomach twist. A sudden twinge of pain ripped through the right side of his head, and he instinctively reached up and grasped his temple, completely missing the sunbonn that Haku threw at him. His eyes rolled up into the back of his head, and he began to pitch forward, right as the needle pierced his stomach. Naruto hit the ground with a thud and didn't move. Last time, Suddenly, the mist ninja split into two. Then four. The masked person kept on dividing so fast, it was making Naruto's head spin and his stomach twist. A sudden twinge of pain ripped through the right side of his head, and he instinctively reached up and grasped his temple, completely missing the sunbomb that Haku threw at him. His eyes rolled up into the back of his head, and he began to pitch forward, right as the needle pierced his stomach. Naruto hit the ground with a thud and didn't move. In less than a second, Anko was at her son's side, checking him over and calling his name. Sasuke was able to refrain from attacking only because he was frozen with dread. He was unable to help his family again. Sasuke, he'll be fine. He's still breathing and his heart rate is a bit high, but it's still strong. I'm more worried about the acid in his stomach, damaging his muscles and other organs right now, Anko said through clenched teeth. But since I'm worthless when it comes to being a medic nin, I think I'll take out my frustrations on a certain mask-wearing kid. With that declaration of pain, Anko and Sasuke engaged the Mist Ninja. Kakashi placed himself between Zabuza and Tazuna along with Sakura. Suddenly, a thick mist began to roll through the area. As if it were some unseen signal, both Zabuza and Kakashi disappeared into the fog. Sakura, you need to protect Tazuna and Naruto. I'd suggest you use your new skills now, but keep some chakra left in case it is needed. Kakashi's disembodied voice rang out through the fog before the sounds of battle replaced it. Sakura only nodded and gave a silent good luck to all of the Konoha shinobi before she moved over to Naruto's body and dragged him back towards Tazuna. Once she was done with that, she bit her thumb and drew blood. Quickly performing seals, she quietly muttered, Kuchios no Jutsu. Summoning technique. With an audible poof, two dogs appeared and stood guard over Tazuna and Naruto. One was an adult golden retriever. He was about 3 feet long and 2 feet tall. He weighed almost 60 pounds and had a small Konoha leaf embroidered onto a handkerchief around his neck. The second dog was an adult bearded collie. She wasn't as tall as the golden retriever, but weighed almost as much. She was only 2 feet long and a foot high, but was much more energetic. In the week that she had been practicing the technique, her chakra reserves had grown rapidly. Since the summoning took a lot of chakra to do, it drained her quickly, and she was then forced to practice controlling what little chakra she still had. The two dogs in question didn't take much chakra to summon. It was about the equivalent of making 4 bunshins, 5 times, each. So for Sakura, that was a lot of chakra. Kamayaku, Streak, Onshu Grace, I need you to guard Tazuna-san while I check on Naruto. Sakura ordered. The two dogs quickly padded over to the old man and tensed as they monitored the battle around them. Well, Kamayaku did. The golden retriever was more battle-hardened than his compatriot. Onshu simply stood there and wagged her tail in anticipation. Sakura quickly worked to diagnose her fallen teammate. His breathing was indeed very labored. His heartbeat was becoming weaker and weaker, and he was beginning to sweat, despite the coolness of the fog, indicating a fever. His body was trying to burn out some invader. While Naruto was unconscious, the QB was working overtime. Something in the DNA of that hunter nin was not agreeing with Naruto's DNA. The demon knew that he could stop the process of absorption anytime he wanted. The seal did allow him to heal his vessel, but he chose to wait. Just a little more time, kid. Just wait a little more. In just a few minutes, his vessel's bloodline would finish copying over the important code for the new bloodline, mastery of water and ice, and he could stop the process. If only the brat could hold on for another minute or two. Sakura was becoming worried. Naruto's symptoms had become more severe as new ones continued to appear. His breathing was becoming very shallow and slow. She felt the once steady beat of his heart slow down under her hands, and it didn't show any signs of strengthening. The weird part of this was that his chakra was becoming more and more focused, like it had some purpose. A sudden burst of chakra from the area of Sasuke drew her attention, but just as soon as she looked up, she felt Naruto's heart beat once, and then stop. The fight between the faux hunter nin and an enraged mother and adopted son was interesting. This hunter nin, Haku, was pretty good, at least mid to high chunin level. Of course, Anko was a Tokubetsu jounin, so it wasn't too difficult to find the winner of the match. Or so you would have thought. After a few minutes of Haku getting beaten into the ground, The Mist Ninja performed a series of one-handed seals, catching the two Konoha shinobi off guard. Hijitsu, Sensatsu Sueisho. Secret technique, flying water needles. Water that was strewn about the field of battle suddenly rose into the air and formed into large icicles that resembled Senbon needles. The deadly popsicles suddenly flew towards the duo, and they were forced to jump into the air at the last minute by adding chakra to their legs to gain more height. As the pair landed, they noticed the small flare of chakra that gave away the annoyance in the Mist Ninja. Hijitsu, Makyu Hyushu. Secret technique, demonic ice mirrors. Once more, water rose up from the bridge and solidified, this time into thick sheets of ice that created a cage of glistening mirrors. Haku slowly walked into the mirrors, and suddenly, the missing ninja appeared in every one of the mirrors. Moving faster than normal eyes could follow, Senbon flew from every direction and hit precise points on Anko's arms, immobilizing them. Sasuke quickly activated his Sharingan and rushed to his mother's side. He quickly removed 3 of the 5 needles that were holding her arms hostage, but was forced to move out of the way by another volley of the thin metal needles. Damn, this is going to get difficult, he thought before launching into another attack. Sakura was panicking. Her teammate was technically dead at her knees, and she didn't know what to do. The first aid covered in the academy was very basic and didn't involve reviving a dead person. She just froze as time slipped by. The sounds of battle didn't distract her, and she continued to stare at Naruto. His face was pale, and his lips were becoming blue. As she knelt next to his body, tears began to form in her eyes, and she cried. She cried at her own inadequacies, she cried at her teammates' unfinished goals, and she cried that a brother and mother would have to deal with this reality. She closed her eyes and wept. While Anko and Sasuke were engaged in their own battle, and Sakura was dealing with her dead comrade, Kakashi was fighting Zabuza. The Mist Ninja was proving to be a worthy challenge, and with the addition of the unnatural mist floating through the area, his Sharingan was next to worthless. The first 2 strikes went to the nuke Nin from Kiri, but they weren't as bad as they looked. A slight cut to the side was more or a hindrance in terms of mobility than a hindrance to his life, and a bruise was forming on his other side from a vicious kick, but all in all things couldn't be going better. His plan was going well. Anko and Sasuke were mopping the floor with Zabuza's accomplice, and Sakura was guarding Tazuna and Naruto. He could finish this fight in one move. Or he could have, until he heard Sakura start bawling. It was that slight noise that caught the ears of Zabuza, who was a master of silent killing. He knew that the blonde was lying motionless if not dead, and his pink-haired teammate was crying over him, leaving the bridge builder defender less. It was the perfect time to strike. Moving silently, Zabuza made his way towards Tazuna, and once he spotted his target through the mist, he charged the man. Kakashi was too far away, and that wound to his side was limiting his speed enough so that the copy ninja couldn't protect the old man. Zabuza swung his large sword at the bridge builder's head, only for the old man to be tackled by a large golden dog. The Mist Ninja was even more surprised when a second dog, this one white and black, attacked him. Anshu had spotted the new man and quickly attacked the man. The Nin dog rose up on her hind legs and brought her clawed paws down onto Zabuza's crotch. The Mist Ninja cried out in pain and doubled over, only to be tackled by the battle-hardened Kamayaku. He hit the unfinished bridge on his back and felt the breath being knocked out of him. In a flash, Anshu was back in the fight, licking his face, while Kamayaku was biting his right arm. With a wave of his left arm, Zabuza was able to dismiss the 2 summons, but was still in pain. He was able to regain his footing, but before he could do anything about his own pain, a large surge of chakra seemed to explode over the bridge. Sakura actually fainted from the sheer amount of killing intent being released. What she didn't realize before passing out was that the chakra wasn't coming from the Jounins. It was coming from her seemingly dead teammate. When Naruto's heart had stopped beating, the Kyuubi was worried. The human body can only survive for a short amount of time without air, and if the DNA absorption didn't finish soon, both he and the kid would die. Almost a minute after Naruto had taken his last breath of air, the process was complete enough for Kyuubi to halt the process. Scanning over the remaining code, the monster fox was able to isolate the problem that Naruto was having. Ah, yes, that would cause his reaction. Won't the Baka be surprised to find this out? He mused as he sat back and watched as normal functions returned to his container. Naruto felt the chakra of the Kyuubi flowing through his system, whereas before he felt nothing. It was like this was the first thing he had ever felt. It felt right, like it belonged. He heard the muffled sound of Sakura fainting behind him, and he shakily stood up to inspect the fighting going on around him. What he saw threw him into a rage, the likes of which had never been seen before. On the ground lay his adopted brother, Sunban, piercing his body like a pincushion. His mother had a fair number of needles in her as well, although she was able to dodge most of the thin projectiles. They were trapped in a crumbling cage of mirrors that seemed to glisten in the weak sunlight. He quickly activated the Sharingan and saw the residual chakra in the mirrors. It wasn't an extraordinary amount, so why was his brother and mother injured so? With a pulse, the chakra of the demon fox flooded through him, and the reasons ceased to be important. Someone had harmed his precious people, and that someone would die. The demonic ice mirrors had turned the tide of the fight. Or actually, the needles that were preventing Anko from using her arms were. If she could move her arms, she could summon a snake or use a fire jutsu. But no, there were needles in her arms that prevented her from doing anything other than dodge. Luckily, the 3 needles that Sasuke had removed were helping restore some movement, and soon she would be able to move her arms enough to remove the final 2. She just hoped that Sasuke could hang on for a while longer. Sasuke was holding his own. His Sharingan was able to anticipate the movements of his opponent, but dodging the needles that were thrown at him was more difficult. If he could destroy the mirrors, then maybe he could buy enough time for Anko to escape or remove the needles. He was beginning to feel the strain on his chakra reserves, but he could hold on for a while longer. While the Mist Ninja was preoccupied with a scorch mark on the pants of his or her battle kimono, Sasuke quickly ran through some hand seals before inhaling a deep breath. Katan, Gakakyu no Jutsu, Fire Type, Grand Fireball. A large ball of flame shot from Sasuke's mouth and impacted the 3 closest ice mirrors. A large cloud of steam issued forth, and when it cleared, the Uchiha was astounded to find that his attack had little effect. "My mirrors cannot be broken by your attack," the mysterious shinobi said, returning his or her attention to Sasuke. The Uchiha glared back at his opponent and tried the Grand Fireball, this time with a twist. Using the new knowledge from his ancestors, Sasuke narrowed the stream of fire coming from his mouth so that it was only a few inches in diameter. It had the same amount of fire as the normal attack, but this one was focused. It impacted a soul mirror, which held its shape for a second before subliming into steam. Although he didn't realize it, Sasuke had just taken the first step towards learning Katan, Karyu Inden, Fire Type, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet, a very advanced Katan technique. Now to get rid of more of those damn mirrors, he thought, and once more flew through the familiar hand seals. After destroying more than half of the almost 20 ice mirrors, Sasuke ran out of chakra to perform the modified technique. The amount of chakra it used was high, and the Mist Ninja was still throwing Sunban at him. Anko had finally gotten enough feeling in her arms to shed the final 2 needles. The steel needles hit the concrete bridge, and in the blink of an eye, she was back in the fight. Katan, Ryuka no Jutsu, Fire Type, Dragon Fire Technique. A large burst of flame finished off many of the remaining mirrors, but before the last one was destroyed, Haku threw 3 final Sunban at the Jounin. But instead of hitting the intended target, Sasuke threw himself in front of his mother and took the needles to the chest. Anko was able to catch him as he fell to the ground, but noticed to her horror that all of the needles had pierced through his right lung. That was what Naruto saw as he awoken, his brother in his mother's arms. "This is bad. I only have enough chakra for Makyu Hyushu once more," Haku thought as the boy who was releasing an insane amount of chakra approached. Running through the hand seals once more, the hunter Nin was shocked when Naruto entered the mirrors as well. "There is nowhere you can hide from my wrath. For harming my family, my precious people, you will die." The boy's voice was colder than the mirrors that formed the battleground. Both Zabuza and Kakashi felt the exponential increase in chakra. Both were shocked by the output that was coming from a scrawny kid. "What is this kid?" Zabuza thought, taking his eyes off Kakashi for a crucial instant. "Has the Kyuubi broken free? No, the seal is still intact. I must finish this now." Kakashi then reached into his flak jacket and removed a small scroll. He unrolled it, and using some blood from a previous wound, smeared a thin line across the black ink of the scroll. He refurled the paper using some acrobatic tosses and slammed it into the ground. Kuchios, Doton, Suga no Jutsu. Summoning, Earth type, tracking Fong technique. A crack in the bridge formed and ran from the scroll towards Zabuza. Suddenly, several large dogs burst from the ground and used Zabuza as a chew toy. Give up now, Kakashi calmly stated. If you don't, your future is death. Damn you, Zabuza growled at the silver-haired man, but it was a show of false bravado. He couldn't move his arms even an inch. Kakashi began to make hand seals and then proceeded to grab his wrist. Chakra gathered in the palm of his hand and began to crackle like lightning. The sound this attack made was unbelievable. It sounded like a flock of birds were chirping, no, laughing, at the prone form before the copy ninja. I'll give you one more chance. If you don't surrender, you will die. Haku was worried. Almost drained of chakra, there was little chance that the blonde could be defeated, especially since Makyu Haishu was worthless. The blonde and black-haired ninja was attacking ruthlessly and with no opening for counterattacks. It would only be a matter of time before he landed the decisive hit, for with Haku nearly drained of chakra, there was no way to retaliate. Firing more Senbon and a stray kunai at the enraged boy, Haku was surprised by the tactic that was subsequently employed. Swait un Suijin Hiki. Water type, water barrier. The projectiles were swallowed by a wall of water at least 4 feet thick. Suddenly, the water barrier began to spin like a top, and the missiles changed course. As water flew off of the barrier from the high-velocity spin, it froze into elongated shards of ice. Matiki Sandansha. Shards of winter. The new spin on the Sensatsu Sueisho took Haku by surprise. The ice shards hit home and threw the mist ninja to the ground, as well as dislodging the mask. Haku was rendered unconscious by the force of the fall and didn't see the enraged boy approaching. Naruto stopped to stare at his opponent. He was expecting either a girl or a very effeminate man, but this was different. Even without the mask on, he still couldn't tell what the gender was. It was rather infuriating, actually, and it was at this time that the Kyuubi's chakra quit flowing through him and the events of the past few minutes caught back up. He felt tired, more so than he had on the rare occasion that he suffered from chakra exhaustion. There was also a dull pain that throbbed through his body, and an itch was slowly spreading from his right arm towards his chest. He suddenly fainted next to a defeated Haku due to exhaustion. Kakashi was cursing his luck. He had charged Zabuza with the intent to finish the man off, but suddenly his summons were dismissed, and Zabuza was free to flee back into the mist. Looking at the scroll, Kakashi noticed some Senbon and ice fragments stuck into the scroll, destroying it. Without the tracking Fong, Kakashi was forced to resort to a different tactic. He had been able to immobilize both of the sword user's arms, and was once more charging chakra for his sole original jutsu, the Raikiri. Lightning Edge. Once his arms were useless, the mist Zabuza had created disappeared, and Kakashi was able to see the damage the various fights had done. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and the mist ninja, Haku, were unconscious, and Anko was helping the wounded. She was working on reviving a fainted Sakura when she sensed a foreign presence on the bridge. The thump of a cane echoed across the bridge. Looking behind Zabuza, everyone who was conscious noticed a short man with grayish-brown hair and a mustache. Some demon you turned out to be. You can't even kill a bunch of kids. Luckily, for me at least, I've determined to terminate your contract early. It wasn't until the figure made his threat that those present noticed the mob of people behind the diminutive figure. Gato, Zabuza growled. Kakashi, it seems that I no longer have a reason to fight you. I do have one last request, though. Would you lend me a kunai? Using his teeth, Zabuza unraveled the bandages that his mouth from view and caught the kunai that was lazily tossed to him by the copy ninja. Dashing forward, the demon of the mist madly hacked his way through the throng of bodies surrounding his former employer, taking many slashes and stab wounds from various weapons in the process. Finally reaching his target, Zabuza cut Gato's thought cleanly and watched as the life slowly ebbed from the fat man. He then collapsed from the wounds he had received earlier. None of the thugs dared to approach the man, for fear of their lives. They did, however, find the courage to threaten the Konoha shinobi. "You just killed our meal ticket." One yelled. "We'll kill you to make some dough." Another supplied. "Damn it, I'm running low on chakra. I might be able to bluff them away." Kakashi thought. Making a cross-shaped seal, he imitated the seals for Kage Bunshin, but he really created 20 Bunshins. The thugs were weary, but began to charge at them anyway, until a large water dragon washed them away. Suetun Suryuden no Jutsu. Water type, water dragon technique. The weak voice of Sasuke came from behind the copy ninja. Anko returned to her injured son's side and helped him over towards where Sakura and Naruto were laying. Haku lay a bit away from the group. Covering his Sharingan, Kakashi made his way towards the only other body on the bridge, Zabuza. The mist ninja was still alive, but was fading due to a lack of blood. "Kakashi, I have one more favor to ask you." Zabuza's voice was weak and nearly inaudible. "I want you to bury me here. It's kinda nice." Those were the last words spoken by Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the bloody mist. Once all of the surviving shinobi, including Haku, were transported back to Tezuna's house, Anko used a messenger scroll to contact Tsunade for Naruto and Sasuke. Sakura was awake again and helping to nurse the various patients. Luck was on their side, since Tsunade happened to be only 2 days away from the Wave Country and was going to be there in less time than that. Haku was being kept under a genjutsu that kept him or her asleep. Although there was little fear of the kid killing anyone, the risk they ran if he or she attacked anyone was higher. Naruto was still asleep and Sasuke was simply suffering from chakra depletion, but those holes in his lungs could be a problem. All the Konoha shinobi could do was wait. The next day, Tsunade arrived around dinner time and set to work immediately. Her assistant Shizune was currently checking on Haku, and her report was due shortly. Sasuke was patched up with little problem. The Senbon attack to his lung looked worse than it was, but it would have escalated had he not received proper treatment. Naruto was a bit of a mystery. Tsunade had a list of his symptoms, but couldn't come up with an explanation for his illness. All of his ailments were common to allergies, but thanks to the Kyuubi, Naruto had never been sick a day in his life or had allergies. Even the fainting was consistent. If an allergic reaction is left untreated, it may escalate to anaphylaxis, which if untreated could turn fatal. Tsunade was once again using a basic diagnostic technique on the Kyuubi container when Shizune entered the room and whispered in her ear. Tsunade's brow wrinkled before a look of comprehension dawned. She nodded to Anko, and the Jounin motioned for Sakura to leave the room. She did so with a look of frustration on her face. Her team didn't trust her to be in their conversation. It would appear, the blonde Sannin began, that Naruto absorbed another bloodline. I noticed the change in his blood, but without the equipment necessary to perform extensive tests, I didn't know what occurred. You said that he showed the same abilities as Haku, right? Due to his bloodline and his guest, Naruto has never had any problems with absorbing anything, but this time he did. All of his prior symptoms are consistent with an allergy, but I didn't know the source until now. It would appear that Haku transferred some of her DNA into Naruto. All of the DNA up until this point was male, but I believe that the female DNA caused an allergic reaction. I think we just have to wait for the Kyuubi to eliminate the excess DNA in his system, and he will be as good as new. True to her word, Naruto was up and about in a day's time. After the explanation of what happened, he was more than happy to train with his new bloodline. He would disappear into the woods for hours at a time. Sasuke was less fortunate. Sakura continued to hang on to him wherever he would go. The only place he was able to get some peace was around Haku. For whatever reason, Sakura was afraid of the mist kunoichi, probably because Haku would kill Sakura in no time. It was while Naruto was off training and Sasuke was able to avoid Sakura enough for Haku to ask the Uchiha question. "Yukaya-san, your mother, she told me that your past and mine were similar. Do you know what she means?" the brunette asked. Sasuke thought about it. He didn't know that much about Haku. "No, I don't," he answered. "But maybe we should talk and find out what Anko-kasen meant." "I'll go first," Haku said. "I was born in Kirigakure. Well, actually, it was a small outlying town, but that's like splitting hairs. My mother was the one with the bloodline, the mastery of water and ice, but she hid it. In Kiri, bloodlines like mine were feared and those with them were hunted down and killed. When my father found out that my mother had won, he killed her, and then he tried to kill me. I don't remember what happened, but somehow I was able to kill my father and all of the members of the mob he had gathered. Then I ran. I ran as far and as fast as I could. I lived on my own for a few years before I met Zabuza-sama. He trained me to be a shinobi and took the place of my father. Eventually, Zabuza led a failed coup, and we had to flee from the Mist Village. We took jobs as nuke nin for various individuals until we were contacted for this assignment. What about you? Sasuke was amazed by the similarities in their lives. Granted, he hadn't killed his father, but they were both the last of their bloodline, not including Naruto, and had adopted new families. I was born into the Uchiha clan. We were famous for our Sharingan and made up the entirety of the police force. But then my brother killed off the entire clan. He used a genjutsu on me and made me relive the slaughter of my family for 3 straight days. When I awoke, I was in the hospital and depressed. It wasn't until Hokage-sama took me to see Naruto and Kaasen that my life changed. Anko has become my mom, and Naruto is the only one I will ever call brother again. This time it was Haku who was in awe of the similarities of the two. They continued to compare their lives for a long time. It wasn't until dinner that the two returned, earning a death glare from Sakura and 2 mischievous looks from Anko and Naruto. In fact, after dinner, Haku approached Kakashi and Anko about returning to Konoha with them, to live life as a civilian. She said it was what Zabuza would have wanted, but deep down Sasuke knew it was because of the same history the two shared, and for once, he didn't mind a girl following him. Sarutobi, the Sandaime Hokage, rolled the message he had been reading up and sighed. Team 7 was returning from their C-B-a rank mission late, but intact. Actually, they were +1 member, a Mist Kunoichi named Haku, who wished to become part of the village as a civilian. The report included her history, and truthfully Sarutobi was impressed. It wasn't every day that the apprentice to the demon of the bloody mist wished to join your village, let alone as a civilian. Well, he'd be dead before he let an opportunity like this slip away. He called some selected individuals into his office. Moments after his summons left his possession, the 4 people he had called arrived. Yuhi Kurenai, Yumino Irika, Shiranui Genma, and Marino Ibiki all entered the office of the Hokage with various degrees of cluelessness, although Ibiki hid his best. "You called us, Hokage-sama?" Irika asked the old man. "Hi. Team 7 will be returning with an extra member, a former Mist Kunoichi by the name of Haku. She was apprenticed to Momochi Zabuza until his death a couple days ago. She wishes to become a Konoha citizen. However, due to her skills, I would like her to be a shinobi. The only problem is that she would need someone to adopt her and sponsor her. She has lived through the mist's cleansing and hasn't had a true family for years. You 4 are the only ones with the ability to defend her, should Hunter Nin come for her, as well as provide the correct atmosphere for someone her age." He handed the 4 the letter he had received from Kakashi and Anko. In turn, the quartet passed it around and read its contents. "Hokage-sama," Irika spoke, "I would like to adopt Haku, seeing as how she is already bonded with Sasuke and Naruto. But as a chunin, I don't have the income to support anyone besides myself, and that's if I don't treat Naruto to ramen. I'm afraid that I wouldn't provide the correct atmosphere in a home that you are looking for," Ibiki stated. Gama was about to make some excuse when Kurenai spoke up. "I'll take the girl," she stated calmly. "I have been lonely as of late, and a companion would do me wonders, and as skilled as she is, perhaps she could inspire Hinata." The Hokage merely nodded his head and dismissed the others. "I will have the paperwork for you later today, and they should be returning in 3 or 4 days. There was a slight incident involving Naruto, but it has been taken care of." Kurenai nodded her head and left the office. 3 weeks had passed since that meeting in the Hokage's office. Team 7 had returned safe and sound, although Sakura was still glaring/hiding at/from Haku. Speaking of the ex-Mist ninja, Yuhi Haku was adapting very well to her life as a Konoha shinobi. Technically, she was on the mandatory 90-day probation period, but that didn't stop her from training with Kurenai, Team 8, or Team 7. Originally, the plan was to have her trained as a medic ninja, but it quickly turned out to be a bad idea. While she was well versed in anatomy and pharmacy, Haku had a problem with being a medic nin. She had a large fear of blood, not tsunade large, but somewhere in between freak out / panic / faint. So the decision was made that Kurenai would train her to become a Jinjutsu specialist. It turned out that Haku had chakra control to rival Sakura, but larger chakra reserves, something the pink-haired girl found to be a grave injustice, although no one was quite sure how she came to that conclusion. It turned out to be the correct move. Haku seemed to be a natural at deception and manipulation, so Jinjutsu came naturally to her. She didn't have a large number of techniques, but when she used them in conjunction with her bloodline limit, they became very difficult to combat. Speaking of blood limits, our protagonist was currently practicing his new bloodline in the forest. Needles of ice were scattered around the area, and even a few had hit their target, Anko. She was pleased with her son's progress with his newest addition. He was faster than Haku when he used the demonic ice mirrors, and when he didn't, but he was quickly growing bored of the same two techniques. So he'd create his own. Whenever Team 7 wasn't training, the different members had their own routines to follow. Naruto would go and train with his various bloodlines and the sealing techniques that the Sandaime gave him. Sasuke would practice his fire manipulation, and Sakura spent an equal amount of time fawning over Sasuke and immersing herself in the world of medical ninjutsu. It turned out she had a knack for the stuff, and after only 3 weeks of practice, was able to heal minor cuts and lacerations. She had grown more accustomed to having Haku around during training, but still saw the girl as a rival for Sasuke's love. Naruto was walking back from the forest having just finished creating a new technique. Okay, technically, he hadn't created it. He had heard about the Setetsu, Iron Sand, that the Sandaime Kazekage was famous for and had been trying to replicate the technique for ages. He had finally succeeded today and was feeling proud of himself. So, in celebration, he would treat himself to Ichiraku ramen. Over the years of living with Sasuke, Naruto had developed a kind of sixth sense when it came to his brother. For instance, he could tell when fangirls were chasing him, or when he was okay. So mainly he could tell when Sasuke was being chased by fangirls. But hey, it was a darn good skill to have at times. He got that feeling right as he turned the corner towards the main street of Konoha. Right on cue, Sasuke rounded the corner followed by hordes of screaming kunoichi. He also noticed that Konohamaru, the grandson of the Hokage, was forced to flee for his life, and in the process, bumped into a shinobi dressed in a black bodysuit with cat ears on the hood. He was wearing purple face paint and had a large bundle wrapped in cloth on his back. He also noticed the Sunagakure insignia emblazoned on his forehead protector. "Little brat, I'll teach you a lesson for running into me." The black-clad kid threatened and lifted Konohamaru off the ground. "Hey, you'd better put him down," Naruto demanded. "Oh, what's a little punk like you gonna do about it?" the mysterious kid asked, still holding Konohamaru. Naruto was between a rock and a hard place. "I don't want to show Setetsu before I have to, although it would probably scare these guys witless." "I know." Naruto drew a kunai from his holder. Through his study of seals, Naruto had pieced together, at least what he though, was the principle behind the Yondaime Hokage's Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God. Although he wasn't capable of recreating the technique, he did create a good bluff. The kunai he had just drawn had a couple seals carved into it. One contained enough chakra to create a Kage Bunshin when it impacted the ground. Another contained a low-level futon technique to quickly dissipate the smoke created by the Kage Bunshin. He would simply use a hinge to transform into something inconspicuous and hope his opponent didn't see through it. The plan worked like a charm. Naruto threw the kunai at the Suna Genin's feet and quickly transformed into a pebble on the ground. Kankuru wasn't able to laugh at the Konoha Genin's attempt at throwing a kunai when a fist connected with his face. He flew behind a blonde girl Naruto didn't notice, although she seemed to be the black-clad boy's teammate. While both of their attention was away from the clone, Naruto dismissed the clone and canceled his hinge. What the hell was that? I couldn't see him move. The boy quickly stood up and watched Naruto help Konohamaru to move out of the way. He quickly unshouldered whatever was strapped to his back, causing his teammate to question his decision. "You're really going to use the crow?" she asked in a surprised voice. As he was about to unwrap the crow, a pebble ricocheted off his hand. "Ow, The boy growled and turned his attention towards the stone thrower. Sasuke sat in a nearby tree, tossing 3 more stones in his hands. You know, that's the Hokage's grandson you were threatening, he stated coldly. The Suna boy stared at Naruto. No, not me, you idiot, Konohamaru. Naruto growled in outrage. Kankuru, stop it. A voice drifted towards the small group. It was coming from Sasuke's position, but no one had felt him arrive. Jigara, Kankuru stuttered. That brat started it. Enough, the red-haired Gaara said forcefully. He was hanging upside down from the tree branch adjacent to Sasuke. You are an embarrassment to our village, Kankuru. If you don't stop, I'll kill you. Turning towards his female teammate, he spoke equally as coldly. Temari, why didn't you stop him? You two were not to make any kind of trouble. Sorry, Gaara. I lost him for a moment and didn't find him until just a moment ago. The blonde Kunoichi replied, shaking. Gaara turned towards the Konoha shinobi. He glanced at Sasuke first. The black-haired boy was able to hold off Kankuru with some rocks, but he was holding back. He is strong, but the blonde. He glanced turned towards Naruto and Konohamaru, who was hiding behind the blonde and black-haired boy. I have no idea how he did that move with the Kanaya replacement, perhaps? No, it was too fast for that. Not even Baki could do a Kawarimi that fast. He is just as strong as the black-haired boy, if not stronger. Something tells me I should be weary of those two. He suddenly disappeared in a swirl of sand before reappearing in front of his teammates. He was wearing a black short-sleeved shirt and dark brown pants, and had a large gourd strapped to his back. He also had dark black rings around his green eyes, or light blue eyes. A light bluish-greenish color. Anyways, it was one of those colors that fights would start about. I'm sorry for my teammates' behavior, he said and began to walk off. Wait, Naruto yelled after the redhead. What's your name? The shortest Suna Genin turned and stared at Naruto. He didn't flinch as Sasuke jumped down from his tree perch and landed next to his brother. Gaara. Sabaka no Gaara. I am interested in your names as well, he calmly stated. Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke said, still feigning his coldness. Uzumaki Naruto. I look forward to seeing you in the upcoming Chunin exams, Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto. Gaara once more turned away before disappearing in another swirl of sand. The boys just turned away after making sure Konohamaru was okay, and began to chat idly. So, Sasuke started Chunin exams, eh? Think Kakashi-sensei will nominate us? Naruto asked. I bet if we hid the registration forms in one of those books he reads he would. Sasuke joked. Indeed, Kakashi did nominate Team 7 for the Chunin exams, which were being held tomorrow. This was a point of annoyance for all members of the Genin team, since they would have little time to prepare for the exams. Just fill out those registration forms and turn them into room 301 by 3 p.m. tomorrow. With that, the lazy/perverted Jounin disappeared in a poof of smoke, leaving the 3 Genin in an anxious mood. Dinner that night was short and subdued. Both boys were muttering about late senseis not giving them enough time to get ready for stuff. Okay, what's this about Kakashi? Enko asked. Oh, that baka of a sensei didn't tell us about the Chunin exams until today. And then he says if we want to participate, we have to fill out these forms and have them for tomorrow. Sasuke complained, as he packed extra clothes into a backpack. Yeah, and if it wasn't for Gaara, we wouldn't even had known about the exams until today. Naruto added. Who is Gaara? The name seemed familiar to Anko, but she couldn't place it. Oh, his name is Sabaka no Gaara. We met him the other day. Konohamaru had trouble with some Suna shinobi and Gaara scared the guy who was bothering us. Naruto explained. Then it struck Anko. Sabaka no Gaara, the Kazekage's youngest son, the vessel for Suna no Shikaku. He was the demon vessel known among the ranks of foreign shinobi as being bloodthirsty and insane. If he met Naruto and Sasuke, he was here for the Chunin exams. That wouldn't be good if he fought with Naruto. Eventually the boys' demons would express themselves, and who knew if the village would survive the fight. Ka-san, is something wrong? Sasuke asked, seeing the panicked expression on his mom's face. Boys, Sabaka no Gaara. He's like Naruto. He had a demon sealed inside him at birth also, but something is wrong with him, He's done higher rank missions than most Chunin, without a scratch on him. Sasuke and Naruto were frozen in understanding. So there was someone else like Naruto. That struck Naruto very hard. Someone had lived through what he had gone through, and if it was half as bad as what happened to him, then that was unacceptable. I'm going for a walk, Naruto said. His voice sounded dead as he exited through the door. Gaara was sitting on the roof of a random building staring at the moon. It was only a quarter full, but already he was dreading the full moon. The voice always got unbearable on those nights. He suddenly felt a presence behind him, and without turning his head, ordered the sand he controlled to crush the intruder. Suetun, Suijin Hiki. A voice spoke softly, and Gaara could feel the sand halt upon contact with the water barrier. He applied more force to the attack, but still his sand couldn't contract around the barrier. He turned his head and, to his utter amazement, found a solid ball of ice surrounded by his sand. "Who are you?" he demanded of the shadowy figure in the ice sphere. The ice melted and a small hole appeared around a familiar face. "I didn't mean to intrude. I come here to look at the sky sometimes," Naruto responded. Gaara didn't say anything. Despite the voice calling for the blood of the boy, Gaara didn't attack. He had orders to wait until the Chunin exams. He simply withdrew his sand and returned his gaze to the moon. He felt Uzumaki sit next to him, a few meters away, and stare into the sky. After a few minutes, Naruto broke the silence. "You stare at the moon a lot. Could you tell me why?" Gaara didn't say anything. The boy with odd hair was quickly wearing out his welcome. "Kill him later." He stood to leave and turned his back to the boy when he heard the boy again. "It's because it seems so alone, isn't it?" Gaara froze. "I thought so. You know, I used to feel the same thing. Until I was almost 8, I lived on my own. I assume that you've heard of the Kyuubi attack, so that in itself is nothing unusual, but while many orphans of the attack were adopted or lived in orphanages, I was different. When I was 5, the orphanage I was living in kicked me out, told me that I wasn't wanted by anyone, and that if I knew what was good, I'd go and kill myself and save the village the trouble. Since I couldn't enter the academy until I was 7, I lived off an allowance that the Hokage gave me. But the looks that followed me, I got those for as long as I can remember. The looks of disgust, the looks of hatred, I got so many of them that I would hide in my shabby apartment for weeks at a time, not leaving until I had to buy food. It's hell, isn't it? Not being loved, not being acknowledged. That's a pain no one should live through." Gaara's eyes widened. As a boy he had never known described his life to A.T. "Then I met Ka-san and Sasuke and Kakashi-sensei. They saved me from that pain. They made my life worth living. I don't know how bad you had it in Suna, but from your appearance and reputation, I can guess it's been worse than mine." Gaara turned to look at the boy, who was still staring at the cloudy sky. "I'm a monster. You wouldn't understand. I can survive on my own. I live to prove my existence." "What makes you so sure?" Naruto asked, still staring at the sky. Gaara simply continued to glare at Naruto. Naruto sighed. "Look, I know the history of Shikaku. The Ichibi, one-tailed, was imprisoned inside a tea kettle and then inside of 2 others, and then you. You don't believe that I can know the pain you've lived through. So I'll ask you this, how strong a tea kettle would you need for Kyuubi?" Gaara was in shock. Beside him sat the vessel for the Kyuubi no Yoko. The strongest demon to roam the earth was imprisoned inside a boy his age. "I may have the strongest demon in existence sealed inside of me, but even I can't live by my own. Not like I was. I don't know what the sky looks like in Suna, but I've heard of sandstorms that block out the sun, so I'll assume you don't get a good look. Look at the sky sometime. Not even the moon is ever alone." Gaara stared up as the clouds, which were obscuring the heavens, parted. There was the moon, as big and bright as ever, but in the background were thousands, millions, perhaps billions of twinkling stars, shining compassion and friendship to the lonely moon. "There is no need for you to be alone, Gaara. If you want, I'll be more than happy to be there for you when you need me." With that, Naruto leapt from the roof and headed home again. Gaara simply stood exactly where he was for a while, before sitting down and thinking about the boy who knew his pain so well. The next day, Team 7 headed towards the academy, room 301. They entered a hallway and saw a bunch of teams mulling about. since two Jinin were blocking the door to room 301. You aren't fit to become Chunin. One said, yeah, we've seen people quite as ninjas because of the Chunin exam. Go home while you can, people die in this exam. The other ordered. A boy in an atrocious green spandex suit with black hair in a bowl cut was pleading with the two Jinin. A kunoichi with her chestnut brown hair up in two buns was pleading with the green-clad boy. Team 7 assumed they were on the same team. Then where was their third member? Sasuke then spotted his rival, Hyuga Niji, leaning against a wall, arms crossed and eyes closed. Team 7 walked past, but Niji opened his eyes and spoke before they got too far. Uchiha. Sasuke replied in kind. Hyuga. Uchiha. Hyuga. Uchi dash. Okay, already. You know each other's last names. God, that was annoying. The girl yelled at the competing genius ninja. Niji and Sasuke simply turned their backs to each other and folded their arms against their chest. HN. They both grunted in unison, creating another staring contest. Yep, it was a Tester 1 fest fit for a high school locker room. You might as well take down the crappy genjutsu you have up. The rookie geniuses were once more speaking in unison, trying to constantly outdo each other. More glares ensued. So, you figured it out? Well, seeing isn't enough. One of the Jinins said, before charging the two teams, only to be stopped by the green boy. Lee, the kunoichi said, belittling her teammate. I thought it was your idea not to show off our strength. The boy sheepishly bowed. Gomen, Tintin, I forgot. The two teams walked towards room 301. The two captains were still glaring at each other, while Tintin and Naruto were cracking up at the two geniuses acting like small kids. As they approached the room, they found Kakashi and a future version of Lee waiting for them. I told you my youthful team wouldn't show up after your team, my eternal rival. The future Lee bellowed at Kakashi. I'm sorry, Guy, did you say something? Guy began to cry. Darn you and your hip attitude. Well, it's a good thing you're all here. The test is optional, but can only be taken in teams of 3, so if someone hadn't come then their entire team would be unable to participate. Kakashi explained. The two teams entered the door to uncertainty.